Chapter 594. Chu Yang's sword light burst forth, and a figure rolled in like a gust of wind from the circular hole that the calamity sword had created behind him. Xie Qiu was like a fish in water, but he had brazenly rushed in like a raging storm. He waved his hand, and a sparkling ice crystal armor condensed on his body. Then he rushed into the fire without stopping. He appeared beside GMO in the next moment. Xie Qiu snapped the necks of the 3 king-level experts who were besieging GMO with a gotcha sound. Xie Qiu smashed the head of the king-level expert on the right with his left hand, and smashed it like a watermelon. Then, he grabbed the last king-level expert's chest with his skinny fingers, and pulled out his heart while it was still alive. Xie Qiu swept past like a gust of wind, and the 3 king-level experts besieging Rue Butong fell down like straws. His skinny body rushed into the camp of the O clan's experts like a whirlwind, and started a massacre. His silhouette left a bloody alley wherever he passed. Chu Yang's hidden sharp determination had already pounced on the gray-robed emperor-level expert from midair by this time. He pierced through the poisonous fog. The sword light was shattered. The gray-robed emperor-level expert Ofangge couldn't believe his eyes. Chu Yang crushed the treasured sword that had accompanied him for his entire life into pieces. Then his hand that was holding the sword turned into blood foam. Then his arm, shoulder, and half of his body got swallowed up by the sword light. His eyes were still filled with confusion, shock, and puzzlement. He had never dreamed that the opposite party would ignore his poisonous technique. This was a highly toxic poison that could make an elephant fall down if it smelled it. But this man's entire body was shrouded in his poisonous fog. And he had still beheaded him? How is this possible? His heart was still filled with these words until his death. How is this possible? People were constantly passing through the circular hole in the main gate. Some of them practiced cold attribute cultivation techniques. So, they had to circulate their cultivation to endure the flames. However, some of the ordinary king-level experts didn't have such good luck. However, these people knew that tonight was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. All the clans were preparing in secret, but none of them had made any move. Therefore, the O clan had never thought that they would be the first clan to be attacked. Therefore, they had been careless in guarding against this attack. Breaking through the main gate of the O clan would be as difficult as ascending to heaven if they missed this opportunity. Moreover, who knows if King of Hell Chu still has any antidote wine. Next time, would the O clan research a special poison to deal with the detoxification wine? This was a risk that no one could take. Therefore, he had to go all out tonight. They endured the burning flames and rushed into the fire. Then, they rushed out of the flames with their bodies burning. They rolled on the ground to extinguish the flames. Then, they rushed into the enemy's formation with blisters all over their bodies. The results of the battle were increasing step by step. Only a few experts of the O clan were left outside the city gate. By the time more than half of the 200 experts had entered the city, long and loud whistling sounds were unceasingly heard. People of the O clan were rushing over here from all directions. Chu Yang and Xie Qiu also led the troops forward like a sharp arrow, and they left no survivors wherever they went. The O clan seemed to have realized that the enemy had already broken through the city's gate tower. So they had also given up on the fight for the city's gate tower. All the experts of the O clan were advancing towards the O clan's main building amidst the mournful howls. This place was the core of the O clan. All of the O clan's top forces, all of their experts, all of their wealth. They were all here. Hundreds of people had already gathered in the square in front of the gate. And more people were still gathering here. Everyone was silent as they looked at the long road in front of them. The roads leading to this place had been sprinkled with poison, including the roof. Moreover, the poisonous fog had filled the entire sky of the O clan. It was dawn, but this place was still very dark. The poisonous fog was so thick and dense that it even surpassed the darkness of the night, where one couldn't even see their own fingers. All the clansmen of the O clan had thrown out all of their stocks. These poisons could kill as soon as they touched blood. But they were of the lowest grade. Most of these poisons could cause one's entire body to fester and be consigned to eternal damnation, as long as one came into contact with them. There was also a lot of floating poisonous fog. It was similar to the poisonous fog of a plague. But it was 100 times more vicious than a plague. If all the poisons of the O clan were to be placed in a densely populated area, it could be clearly said that there wouldn't be a single living being within a radius of several thousand miles. This included livestock, wild fowls and wild beasts, and even plants, trees, flowers and flowers. The area within a radius of 1,000 miles would become a land of death within 100 years. Nothing would be able to live there. Using such a formation to deal with a mere 200 or so enemies seemed to be using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. However, everyone's hearts were restless. They were looking at the wide road with panic in their eyes. In fact, some of them were out of their wits. It seemed as if their spiritual support had been taken away. That was because they knew that the poison formation in the direction of the city gate wasn't much inferior to the one here. And the enemies had broken through from that direction, but they hadn't caused any casualties. Could it be that they weren't afraid of the poison? This thought had defeated the faith of some of the O clan's people. The pillar of the O clan, including their spiritual support, was poison. No one was afraid of using poison to run rampant in the three heavens. No one wasn't afraid of it. In fact, even the AO clan had to give way to them because of their poison. Therefore, the O clan had been growing stronger and stronger. The number of emperor-level experts had also been increasing. The nearby Xie clan only had one emperor-level expert. But the O clan was famous. This was the light of the poison. The O clan would have had at least half as many experts if they hadn't used poison to intimidate the three heavens. They wouldn't have dared to kill. This was the attitude of the people of the three heavens towards the O clan. After all, they would have had to face thousands upon thousands of poison experts as long as they killed one of them. Who would have dared to take such a big risk? However, the enemy wasn't afraid of poison now. This was tantamount to smashing the O clan's biggest pillar of support. It had shattered their illusions and had taken away their most powerful spiritual support. More and more experts of the O clan had gathered. They had slowly formed the scale of 1,000 people in front of the main building. And more people were still rushing over. All the people who had rushed over had tacitly arranged themselves in an orderly manner, according to their original positions and status in the clan. All the guards had spontaneously arranged themselves in a formation. More than 1,000 people were standing quietly in the morning breeze. And the number of people had slowly increased to more than 2,000. Many people had formed teams in the distance and were silently paying attention to this side. Those people were the low-level warriors of the O clan. Everyone below the martial great master level was there. All the people who were standing here were martial great masters or above. 3 old men were standing in the front. Their white beards were fluttering in the wind. Their complexions were cold and stiff. They were the 3 remaining emperor-level elders of the O clan. 5 emperor-level experts had been killed by King of Hell Chu in the Chill Wind Forest. And the first one had died in battle today. The remaining 3 emperor-level elders didn't know that the emperor-level expert who had died today had also died at the hands of King of Hell Chu. The sound of footsteps gradually came from afar. It was accompanied by a murderous aura. It seemed as if countless ancient beasts were slowly walking over step by step. The aura in the air seemed to have solidified as the sound of footsteps got closer and closer. The palms of the 3 emperor-level elders had already started to sweat. Even their foreheads had become somewhat soaked. They could tell from the sound of the footsteps that the enemy's strength hadn't suffered any damage. This also showed that the enemy wasn't afraid of poison. The 3 elders sighed as they looked at the dense poisonous fog that was pervading the air above the main building of the O clan. Despair had faintly risen in their hearts. The clan lord and the young lord had led 300 experts of the clan to hunt down Ao Xie, but they hadn't returned yet. King of Hell Chu had ruthlessly attacked them in the Chill Wind Forest. 30 king-level experts and 5 emperor-level experts had been killed. The strength of the O clan wasn't much now. In fact, it wasn't even 1/4 of its usual strength. There were more than 2,000 people around them. It seemed like a lot of people. But the 3 elders knew that there were only a dozen or so king-level experts among these people. Only a few of them were revered martial artists. But most of them were martial great masters. They were at a disadvantage in terms of strength compared to the enemy. Does the old ancestor know about this matter? An old man licked his lips and asked. The great elder remained silent for a moment. Then he replied, "The old ancestor already knows. But he hasn't come out yet. The old ancestor is an emperor-level expert. Perhaps these enemies wouldn't be enough to deal with him if he were to come out. I only hope that the old ancestor won't come out too late." The great elder didn't speak. He knew that his brother was emboldening him. The old ancestor was an emperor-level expert, and the enemy camp didn't have a corresponding expert. But they would be exhausted to death if they were to deal with so many experts with their own strength. The sound of footsteps was getting clearer and clearer in the dense fog. Suddenly, the dense poisonous fog seemed to be disappearing rapidly, and a black-clothed man appeared in front of them. Wherever he went, the poisonous fog would quickly disappear. It seemed as if a thin snowflake had encountered the scorching sun in the sky. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, a jade-like face and vermilion lips, and a slender figure with a long sword hanging from his waist. He was dressed in black, and looked like a black cloud floating in the sky. It was a handsome youngster. However, this youngster's eyes were filled with endless murderous aura. He stepped out of the poisonous fog, and raised his eyes to look. His gaze was like two sharp sword lights, and he was staring straight at the great elder's face. King of Hell Chu. The great elder was stunned. The great elder had seen Chu Yang the last time he had come to the O clan. Not only had he seen him, but he had also left a deep impression on him. "Great elder, time flies. We meet again." Chu Yang's voice was very gentle. There was a faint and warm smile on his face. In fact, it seemed as if he was a newly married son-in-law who was accompanying his wife to her parents' home. His voice was gentle, and his complexion was warm. However, there was a trace of restraint and shyness on his face. But the content of his words was completely different. "Don't forget that great elder's elegant demeanor is still the same as before. But you're still like a malicious ghost. So, it's good to congratulate you." He faintly smiled. Then he politely said, "Great elder, I've specially sent you to become a real malicious ghost. What do you think? Do you feel like you're going crazy with joy?" To be continued. Chapter 595. King of Hell Chu, are you dealing with my O clan this time? The great elder angrily said. "You are very bold." Chu Yang gently smiled and said, "Does your O clan only know how to talk nonsense like this? My heavenly armament pavilion has already attacked this place. But you still can't determine that I'm dealing with you?" He somewhat pitifully said, "How low is your IQ? You." The great elder was furious. His frosty white eyebrows trembled. Then, he took a long breath, and suppressed the anger in his heart. He then said, "King of Hell Chu, our O clan had handled the matter that day without thinking. We had offended you, and you came back to take revenge. So we have nothing to say. However, you've already killed many of our O clan's people. You've also breached the castle. So you should be able to offset the hatred between us, right? Moreover, you haven't suffered any losses or casualties." His dead fish-like eyes seemed to have softened. He then slowly said, "King of Hell Chu, this old man promises to let bygones be bygones if you withdraw now. And we won't interfere with your heavenly armament pavilion from now on. What do you think?" The great elder's words caused an uproar among the O clan's people. They hadn't expected that the powerful great elder would show weakness in front of the enemy today. This had greatly damaged the O clan's reputation. The great elder was also helpless. Only King of Hell Chu had appeared on the other side. There were still many experts hidden in the dark. The O clan had fallen into a disadvantageous position in today's battle. So they would have avoided this calamity if King of Hell Chu withdrew. They would have made King of Hell Chu die miserably if they had missed this opportunity. They had shown weakness, but it was a delaying tactic. One had to endure humiliation to carry a heavy burden. Moreover, the old ancestor hadn't shown himself yet. So, the O clan's chances of victory would have increased if the old ancestor hadn't retreated. Chu Yang chuckled and said, "Great elder, you must be joking. This is just a misunderstanding. Of course, everything will be fine once the misunderstanding is resolved. As the saying goes, it's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. A friend is a road, and an enemy is a wall. Patience is like a knife above a person's head. Let go when you have to let go. Let go when you can spare people, Great Elder is a wise and farsighted elder. The expression on the Great Elder's face became extremely marvelous after he heard these words. The fact that the other party had fallen into his trap so easily shocked him. Chu Yang naturally saw through the other party's intention. He was just stalling for time. It just so happened that Chu Yang also needed to stall for time. So it was natural that they were an adulterous couple. Even if the Great Elder were to delay, he would only be able to delay until that old ancestor of the O clan came out. Moreover, he already had a countermeasure on his side. Xie Zhiqiu was ready to fight. He reckoned that even if that old man came out, it wouldn't be of much use. The O clan didn't have any other reinforcements or military forces. Chu Yang was not afraid at all. However, the reason why he was stalling for time was because he was the one who had set the fire. 200 experts had rushed out of the raging inferno. The cold attribute energy wasn't that bad. But 70 or 80 king-level experts had different degrees of burns on their bodies. He had ignited so much kerosene at the same time. It was almost comparable to lava. Although everyone had rushed in with injuries, they were about to face so many enemies. It would definitely affect their strength and cause too many unnecessary casualties. However, the Great Elder didn't know about this. The Great Elder wanted to stall for time, so Chu Yang naturally wanted to take advantage of it. Gu Duxing and the others were melting the 3 incomplete versions of the heavy pills in a big bowl of vitality spring water. Everyone who was injured and burned drank a mouthful of it and seized the time to heal their injuries. This period of time was very rare. So, Minister Chu means to stop here? The Great Elder asked tentatively. Stop. Yes, yes. Of course I have to stop. Chu Yang nodded repeatedly. We don't have any enmity between us. Don't you think so? Besides, Great Elder, you're already so old. If you want me to have any enmity with you for stealing your wife, I won't be interested. I won't be able to do it. Don't you think so? It's a misunderstanding. It's fine as long as it's clarified. Great Elder can consider giving me some compensation. Then, I will turn around and leave without any objection. What kind of compensation do you want? The Great Elder hastily asked. He didn't get angry. He thought in his heart, you want to have the hatred of snatching my wife? I've already refined my wife's 5 poisons body. She's already underground. You'll have to die first if you want to snatch my wife. Let me calculate. Minister Chu looked up to the sky. He had a serious look on his face as he calculated. Your O clan deceived me first. Then you ambushed me. And then my losses, my emotional losses, my youth, my belongings, my anger, my liver, my anger, my heart, my depression, my loss, my beauty, my loss, my loss, my loss, my loss, my loss of feelings, my loss of youth, my loss of goods, my loss of anger, my loss of heart, my loss of beauty, my loss of beauty, my loss of girls. He talked about his losses in a row. In fact, he talked about 30 to 40 kinds of losses. The Great Elder got angry when he heard this. He almost wanted to strangle Chu Yang to death. However, he had no choice but to endure the current situation. So he listened with a smile on his face. Everything will be fine as long as this bastard leaves. It's just a matter of a few words for me to flatten this little guy. Chu Yang talked nonstop about his losses until Gu Duxing coughed softly and said, That's enough. Then he stopped. He took a deep breath and said, That's all. It's fine if you compensate me. I don't want to go overboard. I'm just putting myself in your shoes. So I don't want to offend you. What kind of compensation do you want? The Great Elder restrained his anger, but his eyes were flickering with anger. It's very simple. The people of your O clan will commit suicide together. Then you'll give me this territory, and it'll be okay. Chu Yang faintly smiled. What do you think? The Great Elder's entire body started to tremble. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He clenched his teeth and said, Are you playing with me? Smart. Chu Yang snapped his fingers. He then said with a smile, You're a genius child. The Great Elder looked at Chu Yang with anger in his eyes. He was so angry that it seemed as if he was going to suffer from asthma. His entire body seemed to be filled with air, and he slowly swelled up. Then he suddenly shouted, Son of a bitch. Don't shout your own name so loudly. Chu Yang sincerely and earnestly instructed. This isn't good. Others will scold your father. Die. The great elder was so angry that he had lost his reason. His stature grew, and he rushed over. His body hadn't arrived yet, but a sharp whistling sound was heard in the air. Go back. Two silhouettes flashed. Two emperor-level experts flashed out of the gray fog behind Chu Yang and went to greet the great elder. Then, the dense fog stirred up, and more than 200 experts quietly appeared. Each of them was wearing a black robe and a sinister mask on their faces. The great elder turned over and retreated with two thumping sounds. He then looked at these 200 people in front of him in bewilderment. He was surprised to find that even the weakest among them was a king-level expert. Where did King of Hell Chu find so many experts? These are all the people of your heavenly armament pavilion? The great elder's eyes flickered as he asked. Of course. They aren't the people of the heavenly armament pavilion. Could it be that they are the people of your clan? Chu Yang curled his lips and said with a smile, surrender and commit suicide. Be obedient. The great elder staggered. Despair rose in his heart. Several alarmed cries came from the crowd of the O clan behind him. They were in an uproar. The enemy's lineup is so formidable. Chu Yang's gaze turned cold. The murderous intention in his eyes slowly became more and more intense. He then waved his hand. Go. Kill them all. Don't leave anyone alive. More than 200 people set into action. As soon as the order was given, they rushed straight towards the densely packed troops of the O clan. Battle cries resounded everywhere. Saber lights and sword shadows flashed back and forth. Blood-curdling screams resounded. The great elder stood in front of Chu Yang in a daze. He looked at this group of mysterious enemies rushing and killing inside the 10,000 poisons great array that his clan had painstakingly arranged. They weren't affected in the slightest. So he felt bitter in his heart. O clan is finished. The great elder felt even more uncomfortable as this thought rose in his mind. I only want to ask one thing. The great elder smiled sadly. How come you aren't afraid of poison? It's very simple. Our physique is very good, Chu Yang replied. The great elder knew that Chu Yang wouldn't blame him, so he heaved a long sigh. Then he suddenly shouted, Ancestor! Ancestor, please come out quickly. The O clan is finished. The O clan is finished. His voice spread far and wide like a thunderbolt. His voice was filled with sorrow and despair, so almost everyone could hear it. The great elder knew that such a big thing had happened, so the ancestor must have known about it. Moreover, the great elder was watching from the sidelines. However, he felt more and more sorrowful because of this. Is the ancestor of my clan helplessly watching the destruction of my clan? The battle cries were still echoing. The people of the O clan were still falling down in droves. A group of revered martial artists and martial great masters were facing a large group of king-level experts and emperor-level experts. In fact, the disparity between them couldn't be measured with words. The great elder finally threw himself into the battle. He attacked with grief and indignation. He wanted to find King of Hell Chu. He wanted to kill this chief culprit first. However, he couldn't reach King of Hell Chu's side under the siege. He could only look at that damned bastard as he continued to sneakily plot against the O clan's people. And the O clan's people fell into his hands one after another. Aoxia Yin was the craziest in the battle. He was wearing the mask of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. His eyes had already turned red from the killing. He would roar in his heart every time he killed someone. Revenge. I will take revenge for you. His heart was getting more and more sour, and it was getting more and more resentful. I only want to kill the enemy. Du Qingyan and Qin Zhan's faces floated in front of him. Their eyes were vaguely filled with worry and concern. Uncle Du, Uncle Qin, I will take revenge for you. Do you see it? Aoxia Yin was crazily killing. His heart ached, and tears suddenly streamed down his cheeks. Do you see it? Do you see it? Aoxia Yin suddenly faced upwards and roared. Tears streamed down his face. I will take revenge for you. I will take revenge. I will take revenge. Aoxia Yin crazily chopped the enemy in front of him into two halves. Then, he chopped the enemy's waist with his sword. He chopped the enemy into pieces, as if he was chopping melons and vegetables. He roared violently after he attacked with his sword. Then he started to bawl loudly. He cried so hard that his liver and intestines were cut to pieces. He cried so hard that snot and tears flowed down his face. He attacked the enemy with his sword while crying. I hate it. I feel so bad. Because you won't be able to see it even if I kill all the enemies. You won't be able to see it. To be continued. Chapter 596. Suddenly, a gloomy voice resounded in this chaotic place. Where did this bastard come from? How dare he behave so atrociously in my clan? This voice was gloomy, but it seemed to carry a kind of rotten smell. It could make people want to vomit after they heard it. It seemed as if a wet viper had suddenly crouched down on their bodies. The battlefield suddenly quieted down. Everyone stopped their attacks by chance. They raised their heads to look. Xie Zhiqiu quietly moved a few steps and stood beside Chu Yang. Apart from him, no one else among the people present on the scene knew that this old ancestor of the O clan was cunning, cruel and dreadful. O Kufeng was a dreadful opponent. He was as timid as a mouse, but he was as cunning as a fox, and as cruel as a wolf. He would run away as soon as he felt a sense of crisis. However, he would stop at nothing if he felt that he could suppress his opponent. He would torture his enemy to death. He had once killed a person for 80 days. That person had no flesh on his body by the time he had killed him on the 80th day. His blood had also flowed out. But he hadn't died yet. So he had pierced his finger into his opponent's throat. Xie Zhiqiu was wearing a mask in black clothes. He had only used the strength of a king-level expert in this fight. He hadn't dared to expose his true strength. That was because he knew that O Kufeng would have looked on helplessly, as the entire O clan was razed to the ground, if he had exposed his true strength. After all, he wouldn't have risked his life. However, O Kufeng would have been left with endless troubles in the future, if he had managed to escape today. Such an enemy would have been hiding in the dark, and could launch an attack at any time. Even the Xie clan would have had a headache, if he had relied on his superb poison techniques, and world-shaking Xian techniques. Moreover, they would have been powerless against him, so they could only make him come out first. Xie Zhiqiu felt that this divine sense was scanning the battlefield back and forth during the fight. It seemed as if it was looking for something. It seemed as if it was worried about something. Xie Zhiqiu restrained his aura even more cautiously. O Kufeng finally jumped out arrogantly when he discovered that none of the enemies present on the scene could pose a threat to him. However, only 700 or 800 people remained from the original 2,000 people at the entrance of the O clan's main hall. However, O Kufeng obviously didn't care. The great elder of the O clan and the others heaved a sigh of relief. The ancestor is finally going to make a move. We've already suffered disastrous casualties, but we can still preserve our foundation. Under the light of dawn, a gray-clothed figure could be seen standing on the roof of the hall. His eyes, which were the size of mung beans, emitted a viper-like light, cruel and cold. Just by looking into his eyes, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. There was no sign of life on this person at all. It was as if an ancient zombie had suddenly appeared in the human world. There wasn't the slightest bit of emotion. He didn't even have the slightest bit of affection for his own clansmen and descendants. This was an extremely selfish person. Even though he had shown himself, he was still standing at a high place. Although he was arrogant, anyone with a discerning eye could see that he would immediately run away as soon as the situation went wrong. Think of a way to make him come down. Xie Zhiqiu didn't dare to raise his head. Yi Xuan raised his head. O Kufeng might disappear in the blink of an eye if O Kufeng sensed my gaze. Chu Yang nodded. He then raised his head and looked at O Kufeng. Where did such a monster come from? He actually looks like a human. Bold Jr., you dare to insult our ancestor. The great elder of the O clan shouted angrily. He is your ancestor. Chu Yang's face suddenly became clear. No wonder. No wonder your O clan looks neither like a human nor a ghost. So that's how it is. Little one, you're dead. O Kufeng looked down at Chu Yang with his sinister eyes from above. He then said in a gloomy voice, Motherfucker. You scared me to death. Chu Yang spat out a mouthful of saliva. He then waved his hand and said, What are you still doing? Hurry up and get to work. Finish this job. Kill all these people in front of us. Then set a big fire and withdraw. As for that old bastard, let him stay there. Kill. Gu Du Xing burst into loud laughter. He then brandished his sword, and the sword light curled up. 7 or 8 people didn't even have time to scream before they were cut into 2 halves. Then Dong Wuxiang, Ao Xie and the others also moved into action. Tan Tan shouted as he moved. Kill them. Motherfucker. Why do I feel like I'm killing chickens? I feel even more at ease after I see that old bastard. Motherfucker. Everyone says that I'm ugly. But I've discovered that I'm a handsome man when I see this old bastard. It's rare for me to be so satisfied. It's so cool. The O clan's people fell down in large numbers. The great elder and the others were furious. However, O Kufeng frowned and chuckled. Do you want to provoke me to go down? So that you can kill me? I won't fall into your trap. I won't go down. The O clan's emperor expert who was fighting with Dong Wuxiang couldn't help but fiercely spurt out blood when he heard these words. He had been bitterly supporting himself under Dong Wuxiang's violent and overbearing attacks. So, he had suffered internal injuries. He became angry, anxious, and desperate when he heard his ancestors' words. So he couldn't help but spurt out blood. Dong Wuxiang shouted loudly. He suddenly jumped up and chopped him into 2 halves with his saber. He didn't even blink his eyes as he dragged his saber and rushed to the other battlefield. The battlefield was shrinking, and the O clan was suffering more and more casualties. However, only 4 or 5 people had died on the black-robed men's side. The disparity between the 2 sides was too big. The remaining 2 emperor-level experts were besieged and suppressed by 8 emperor-level experts. They were battered and exhausted, and they were crying for help. O Kufeng stood up and then sat down. He stood up and then sat down again. He wanted to come down, but he felt that it wouldn't be so simple. So he was hesitating. He was cold-blooded and cruel, but he didn't want to see his grandchildren die tragically. However, his keen intuition had told him that there was a great danger down there. I can't go down. He had always been cautious. So, he couldn't go down even though he was anxious. His pair of will-o'-the-wisp eyes were searching everywhere. He wanted to find the so-called hidden danger. The great elder finally despaired. Chu Yang tightly knitted his brows. He secretly cursed in his heart. This bastard is too calm. He's watching his clan get exterminated. But he's still indifferent. What should I think of to make him come down? The reason why Chu Yang had insisted on fighting this war was to get rid of the O clan first. It wasn't because of the hatred between them. 10 years isn't too late to take revenge. Chu Yang never lacked patience. But he knew that the existence of the O clan was a great threat. It was because their poison was simply impossible to guard against. Even the Ao clan was extremely wary of this clan that was good at using poison. Mo Tianji's Jirong had already caused a turmoil in the Jianghu. The news that Ao Xie was being hunted down had also spread out. The Jianghu was on the verge of erupting. However, no one had made a move. It was because of the existence of the O clan. After all, not everyone was immune to poison like him. Even monarch-level experts couldn't do it. The O clan could create a terrifying effect if they didn't remove the roots. And it was difficult for any clan to bear the consequences of the O clan's poison. Their martial strength wasn't frightening. What was frightening was their poison. The Jianghu wouldn't be seriously damaged if the O clan wasn't eliminated. Therefore, the O clan could only vent their anger on the other clans. Therefore, Chu Yang had made a prompt decision to formulate a plan to destroy the O clan after he had learned about the situation in the Jianghu. However, O Kufeng wasn't coming down no matter what. So it was undoubtedly a sore point. And it would become a sore point for all the big clans if he were to escape. Chu Yang rolled his eyes. Then, he hardened his heart and shouted, "You guys hurry up and deal with the people below. I will deal with this old bastard above. Do you think I won't go up if you don't come down? I can only create an opportunity if I get close to him. Otherwise, it would be impossible to catch him since he was always on top and below. Nothing ventured, nothing gained." Xie Qiu was startled. He hastily said, "What are you doing? Don't take any risks. Don't move. He'll run away if you move," Chu Yang said in a low voice. "I also didn't want to face this old devil alone. But I didn't expect that this guy would be so cowardly and cold-blooded. His grandchildren have been killed, and his foundation has been destroyed. But he can still remain calm. But he won't run away if he sees that I'm only a king-level expert, right?" He'll only torture you to death. Xie Zhiqiu snorted. He then lowered his head and said, It's too risky. I still feel that it's inappropriate for you to go up. Don't worry. Chu Yang tucked the corner of his robe into his waist. He then raised his eyes and looked up. Tisk, be careful. Xie Zhiqiu lowered his head and solemnly said. Chu Yang nodded. Then he let out a long whistle. Old beast, you don't dare to come down, right? This young master will come up and play with you. Chu Yang's figure shot up like a meteor. He borrowed strength twice in the air and landed in front of Okafeng. Okafeng smiled cruelly. Ha ha ha. Junior, you're the chief culprit of today's disaster, aren't you? It's rare for you to have such courage. So this old ancestor will fulfill your wish today. He looked around and saw that there was a battle going on below. It seemed that there was no special expert present. Okafeng finally felt relieved. They wouldn't have let their leader, King of Hell Chu, throw away his life if there was a hidden super expert, right? He felt relieved as soon as he thought of this. But he also felt somewhat annoyed. I would have gone down earlier if I had known this earlier. It's too late to go down now. Everyone is dead. He was thinking this when he saw that Junior pull out his sword with a schwa sound. Then he loudly said, Okafeng, old beast, come up to meet your death. Okafeng became furious. He thought, you have many people down there. I'll be outnumbered if I go down. But you've come up here. Why should I be afraid of you? He laughed nastily. I'll help you since you're courting death. Suddenly, he stretched out his hands, and green smoke started to rise from his 10 fingers. His entire body was shrouded in a mass of green smoke in an instant. The jade tiles under his feet started to corrode as soon as they came in contact with this green smoke. And they started to emit a dense sour smell. The green smoke that's coming out of his body can even corrode stones. Such a poisonous technique is simply world-shocking. Second reading of the sun. My train of thought has been very difficult for the past 2 days. I don't want to write anything. Cough cough. I'm calling everyone to make a post and praise me. For example, I'm very handsome, very confident, very elegant, very well written, and so on. I'm very happy when I see such posts. I'm very happy. And my train of thought is like a tide. The third reading is coming soon. Go and make a post. Don't worry about my embarrassment. It would be even better if you praise me at length. I'm bashfully leaving the post. And I'm asking for votes. To be continued. Chapter 597. Xie Zhiqiu was startled. This Okafeng has already reached the peak of emperor level. He's only one step away from becoming a monarch-level expert. Xie Zhiqiu's chest ached as he thought of this. This bastard's cultivation is already so high, but he still doesn't dare to come down in the face of a group of king-level masters. Okafeng had already started to fight with Chu Yang. You're still wet behind the ears. You've dared to invade my O clan. This old man will destroy you. It's not an invasion, but a massacre. Chu Yang dodged again and again. He sneered and said, Coward. Just watch as your family turns into ruins. Let me tell you, I have countless monarch-level guards around me. If you dare to use your full strength, you'll definitely die. Okafeng was startled. He immediately withdrew his hand and said angrily, Where is it? Where is it? Call them out and I'll crush them all to death. Chu Yang was speechless. He had seen many experts, but he had never seen such a cowardly expert in his life. Okafeng raised his eyes and looked all around. Then, his spirit sense spread out in all directions and started to search carefully. Then, a strange smile appeared on his face after a long while. Little bastard. Do you think that this old man will be afraid just because you're bluffing? Today, even if a supreme being was here, you wouldn't be able to escape death. Chu Yang swallowed his saliva. The experts of the O clan had been killed when Okafeng had been looking around. The last one to die was that great elder. He had been knocked down to the ground by the joint efforts of Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang. He had looked up with a resentful and powerless expression in his eyes before he had died. Then he had sullenly roared, Old ancestor. However, Okafeng had turned a blind eye to him. In fact, he had started to look for the so-called group of monarch-level experts. Chu Yang was truly convinced. No wonder this guy could live for so long. It wasn't without reason. Okafeng cautiously walked forward. An ominous glint flickered in his eyes. Chu Yang rolled his eyes. Suddenly he waved his hand and shouted, "Go! Kill him!" Okafeng was startled. He retreated 100 feet with a schwa sound and returned to his original position. Then he covered his chest with his palms and shouted, "Who is it?" But even after being on guard for a long time, not even half a shadow came over. Chu Yang was already laughing so hard that he was holding his stomach and bending over. He immediately realized that he had been tricked. His old face flushed red, and he angrily said, "Good Junior, I'm going to tear you apart." With a loud shout, his body swayed, leaving behind afterimages in the air as he rushed towards Chu Yang. Chu Yang suddenly felt boundless pressure enveloping him. He suddenly straightened his body and exposed a mocking smile. He waved his hand and said, "Good opportunity. Kill." Okafeng shouted loudly. Then he somersaulted and went out. The countless afterimages disappeared again. He returned to his original position and looked at Chu Yang in amazement. Chu Yang burst into laughter. "I really didn't expect that there would be such a cowardly emperor-level expert in this world." With just a hand gesture and a few words, he had already become a frightened bird. What a joke! In fact, Chu Yang found it somewhat strange. How did Okafeng reach his current cultivation when he was so timid and afraid of trouble? However, Chu Yang didn't know that Okafeng had been extremely daring in those days. He had been so daring that he had gone to the upper 3 heavens to steal purple crystals. Moreover, he had gone there several times in a row. He had walked in the dark for a long time, and had eventually encountered a ghost. Countless people had besieged and intercepted him. Then he had been captured alive. He had been locked in the dungeon, and had been subjected to almost all the cruel punishments of the day. After that, the O clan had taken out almost all of its wealth to bail him out. His temperament had changed greatly since that time. He had become a frightened bird like this. He had been cultivating in seclusion all year round. But the shadow in his heart couldn't be eliminated. Okafeng had been tricked once again. He was furious. His old face had turned purple. He roared like thunder. "Junior, what else can you do apart from bluffing?" Chu Yang coldly snorted and said, "How do you know that I'm bluffing? Let me tell you, Okafeng. You will die if you dare to come here." Okafeng angrily howled. His entire body seemed to have become huge in an instant. He walked over step by step with a murderous look on his face. He then said in a sinister manner, "Junior, try to scare me again." Chu Yang sneered and said, "You come here. Let's go." Okafeng rushed over with large strides. Chu Yang suddenly tilted his head. It seemed as if he was listening to something. Then his lips squirmed twice. Okafeng's imposing manner was like a rainbow. But he muttered in his heart when he saw this. Is there really an ambush? He couldn't help but hesitate in his heart. Chu Yang turned his head at this moment and looked at Okafeng. He then shouted, "Yes. Good." Okafeng was startled. This bastard has tricked me into coming here to throw away my life. He hastily drew back. Suddenly, a sword light flashed in front of his eyes, and it covered the sky and covered the earth. Chu Yang's tribulation sword moved. Cold light pierced 10,000 fathoms to meet his head head-on. Okafeng shouted loudly and attacked with both of his arms. But Chu Yang then roared, "What harm is there in slaughtering the entire world?" Okafeng was retreating, but he hastily put his arms together. Then, the tribulation sword pierced the 2 small iron rods in his hands with a ding sound. The tribulation sword's sharpness couldn't penetrate them. Chu Yang felt apprehensive in his heart. What kind of treasure are these 2 small iron rods of Okafeng? This is the first time that I've seen a weapon that the tribulation sword can't destroy. Chu Yang instantly made a decision in his heart. I must snatch them and see what these things are. However, Okafeng was already retreating, so he was pushed back by a huge thrust at this moment. His body bent over, and he was sent flying backwards. Chu Yang's longsword flickered and blocked Okafeng's weapon. In fact, Okafeng was sent flying back 400 feet. Okafeng roared loudly. He knew that he had been tricked, but he couldn't free his hands to counterattack. So he was sent flying back. He was remorseful in his heart when Chu Yang suddenly raised his left hand and slapped him in the face with a bang sound. This slap wasn't heavy, but it was an extreme humiliation. Okafeng couldn't bear it any longer. He roared loudly and was about to counterattack. However, he saw Chu Yang fiercely withdraw his sword and draw back. Then he indifferently said, "Well, deal with him." Okafeng turned pale with fright. So the real attack is here. He didn't have time to attack. Instead, he jumped up with a schwa sound and soared high into the sky. He then tried to escape, but he didn't feel anything. He turned his head in the sky and saw that Chu Yang was holding his sword. He was laughing so hard that he couldn't breathe. Laughter was also heard from below. Okafeng flew into a rage. "I've been tricked again. I've been tricked by the same trick 4 times in a row. Not only have I been tricked, but I've also been slapped in the face. This is a great humiliation." Okafeng raised his head and roared loudly. His white hair fluttered in the air as he landed. The murderous aura in his eyes gradually became thicker. "I'll kill you first no matter what tricks you have up your sleeves this time." Chu Yang waved his hand again. "Attack." Okafeng paid no attention to him. Instead, he sped up and rushed forward. Chu Yang shouted loudly, "Great! Kill!" Okafeng turned a deaf ear to him. The anger in his heart became more and more intense. In fact, his eyes had turned red. "You still want to deceive me? No way. Do you think that I'm mentally retarded? This old man has been bitten by a snake in the morning and is afraid of ropes for 10 years. That's all." Chu Yang exposed a panic-stricken look on his face. He pulled out his long sword with a clang sound. Then, he pointed the tip of his sword at Okafeng and shouted, "Kill him." Okafeng felt apprehensive in his heart. But he still didn't stop. "Oh my God." Chu Yang turned around and ran away. "Little bastard. You've really been deceiving me." Okafeng had summoned up his courage and rushed over in anger. However, he was still somewhat nervous in his heart. But all his worries had been put down when the opposite party had fled. So, they had transformed into a monstrous anger. Chu Yang fled back and forth on the roof at lightning speed. "Everyone run quickly. This old bastard has gone crazy." Then he shouted again, "Everyone, let's attack him together. We'll crush him to death by relying on our numbers." Then he suddenly shouted in panic, "Someone come. Someone come. Quickly come here. You asterisk 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 asterisk." Okafeng became more and more complacent. His heart was filled with the pleasure of a cat playing with a mouse. He laughed cruelly. "Little bastard. Let's see where you'll escape to. Help me." Chu Yang screamed miserably. Okafeng turned a deaf ear to him and pounced over. Chu Yang clenched his teeth. "I'll stake it all." His hand suddenly emitted a dazzling sword light. Then, he launched a series of sword moves at the same time. Suddenly, wind and thunder rose from the ground. Countless sword lights crisscrossed and submerged Okafeng's entire body. Okafeng crazily shouted in the midst of the sword lights, "Ignorant junior! Your swordsmanship is good, but how can you injure your ancestor with this level of cultivation?" Ha ha ha! The sword light pervaded the air and blocked Okafeng's line of sight. Xie Qiu took advantage of this opportunity and leapt up as light as a feather. Then he hid in ambush from afar. Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang also looked at each other. Then they also jumped up one after another. Chu Yang withdrew the sword light. He then turned around and fled while shouting, "Oh no!" Okafeng's clothes were in disarray. However, his body and muscles weren't damaged in the slightest. Only white scars could be seen on his body. The body of an emperor-level expert had been tempered by the poison technique. So its degree of hardness had far surpassed the hardness of fine iron. Moreover, Chu Yang's sword moves were scattered, so he couldn't gather his full strength. Moreover, his martial power was far inferior to Okafeng's, so he couldn't injure Okafeng even with the sharpness of the Calamity Sword. Okafeng burst into loud laughter. Then he quickly rushed over. "Junior, do you still want to escape?" Chu Yang panted for breath as he desperately tried to escape. Okafeng shouted as he chased after him. Then he grinned evilly. "Little, this old man won't let you die. I'll catch you and run away. I'll see why you're not afraid of our O clan's poison." "Ha ha ha!" Chu Yang angrily said. "Your entire clan is done for. Only a coward like you is left. Quickly commit suicide. What are you waiting for?" Okafeng flew into a rage and said, "I'll kill you first." His agility skill was extremely fast. He had already caught up with Chu Yang while he was speaking. Suddenly Chu Yang shouted loudly, "He has arrived at the trap. Quickly attack." Okafeng gawked. He hesitated for a moment. Then Chu Yang slipped away like a fish. Then, he turned his head and smiled. "Old bastard, you've been fooled again." Okafeng almost vomited blood. He simply shut his mouth and chased after Chu Yang with all his might. He wouldn't believe Chu Yang no matter what he said. More than 200 king-level experts are still looking up from below. Why would I be afraid if they don't come up? The most important thing right now is to ruthlessly deal with this evil little bastard. Who can stop me if I want to leave later? Chu Yang flew away for another 200 feet. Then he once again shouted, "Attack." Okafeng evilly grinned. He rushed over without any scruples. He stretched out his hands. "Junior, do you think that I still believe you?" Ah. It seemed as if a pair of big hands had flashed out of the void at this moment. Then, they carried a heaven-collapsing and earth-shattering momentum as they ruthlessly pounded on his chest with a loud bang. Chapter 598. The power of this attack had far exceeded Okafeng's own strength. Okafeng was caught off guard, so several cracking sounds were heard. Okafeng's ribs were broken, and his internal organs were severely injured. He raised his head and spat out a mouthful of blood. The bright blood was mixed with pieces of his internal organs. Okafeng's heart turned ice cold. He couldn't even feel the pain in his body at this moment. He only felt one thing. I've been fooled. This is a real ambush. A fatal ambush. The opposite party has a monarch-level expert. Okafeng's heart was filled with regret in an instant. Who could have stopped me if I had left from the beginning? This ambushing expert is very strong, but he's far from being able to kill me. Therefore, I could only wait for a sneak attack to kill him. However, it was already too late for him to realize this. This attack would have been a fatal injury. Chu Yang had put on an act for the purpose of Xie Zhiqiu's attack. Okafeng was extremely cautious. In fact, he was excessively cautious. It wouldn't be easy for anyone to kill such a person. After all, he wouldn't give anyone a chance to deal with him. Chu Yang had risked his life to tease him a moment ago. There were more than 200 experts below, but none of them had dared to go up to him. He would have run away if they had gone up. He would have become the biggest hidden danger if he had run away. In fact, it would have been enough to make people restless. Therefore, Chu Yang could only break his head to make him stay. His cautiousness was an advantage, but his excessive cautiousness was his weakness. Therefore, Chu Yang had tirelessly teased, deceived, and played with him. And he had finally succeeded in provoking Okafeng's anger. Chu Yang had been fully confident in his heart when he had slapped Okafeng's face. Okafeng can't run away. He wouldn't have been able to endure such an insult, even if he had been able to endure it. Sure enough, Yang Kafeng was enraged. However, Chu Yang still didn't feel at ease. So, he continued to test him a few more times. And he had thoroughly dispelled Okafeng's last misgivings. It's only logical at this time. This process seemed tedious, but it was indispensable. This plan couldn't have succeeded even if Okafeng had been a little cautious. First he provoked and angered him. Then he provoked and angered him. Then, he humiliated and angered him even more. After that, it became a test. Finally, he provoked and angered this guy to the point that he lost all reason and all caution. Only then did he succeed. It was as if Chu Yang was holding his own head and dancing on a steel wire rope above a high cliff. Every moment, was a fatal crisis. The gap between the two sides was too great. The difference between a mid-grade king-level expert and a mid-grade emperor-level expert wasn't as simple as a mid-grade revered martial artist and a mid-grade king-level expert. In fact, the gap between a first-grade emperor-level expert and a second-grade emperor-level expert was comparable to the gap between a high-grade revered martial artist and a low-grade king-level expert. Furthermore, the further one progressed, the greater the disparity. To provoke such a powerful existence with such a tiny amount of strength, how could the danger be described in just a few sentences? Not to mention other things, with Chu Yang's current martial power, even using calamity, sword would not be able to hurt him. Xie Zhiqiu's two palms heavily pounded on Okafeng's body. Okufeng's entire body felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He crazily spouted blood and was sent flying backwards. At this instant a sword light flew up from the left side. The man and the sword combined as one. The sword light was dazzling and swift. Then, it heavily pounded on Okufeng's body. A saber light dazzled on the right side. The man and the saber light were like one. The saber light was mighty and overbearing. It heavily pounded on Okufeng's body. Gu Du Xing, Dong Wu Shang, the Sword Emperor, and the Saber Emperor attacked at the same time. The black dragon sword pierced straight into Okufeng's body from the left side and came out from the right side. The black saber hacked down from the right side. The tip of the saber had already appeared on the left side of Okufeng's body by the time he regained his balance. It seemed as if the saber and sword had installed a cross in Okufeng's body. The saber light and the sword energy exploded inside Okufeng's body at the same time. Okufeng screamed loudly. He was constantly spitting out blood clots and pieces of his internal organs. However, he was still struggling. He screamed miserably as he used the last of his strength to firmly clamp the saber and sword. Gu Du Xing and Dong Wushang screamed as they were sent flying like rubber balls. Xie Zhiqiu's silhouette flashed as he rushed forward. His palms were like mountain-splitting axes. He pounded on Okufeng's body a dozen times in succession. Okufeng's body swayed from side to side. His flesh and blood continued to fall from his body, and his white skeleton was exposed. However, he kept his mouth shut and didn't fall down. He ferociously glared at Xie Zhiqiu with his ghastly eyes. He didn't draw back. Instead, he advanced forward. He fiercely extended his hands and thrust them towards Xie Zhiqiu's eyes. He clearly realized that his sternum had been broken, and his internal organs had been destroyed. His current injuries meant that he would die for sure. It was impossible for him to perish together with his opponent. So the only thing he could do was to attack his opponent's fragile eyes. Therefore, he didn't dodge or evade the last dozen or so palms. Instead, he resolutely counterattacked. Okufeng's timidity and cowardice had miraculously disappeared in the face of certain death. The only thing that remained was his grasp of the battle situation and his determination to fight to the death. This final counterattack has revealed the demeanor of an expert. The opponent has already launched a dozen or so palms. So, he doesn't have the strength to continue. I can at least destroy one of his eyes if I attack him now. Only one eye, but it's enough. Okufeng had already converted all his poison techniques into corpse poison. The moment the sword and saber had pierced into his body, he knew that he would die for sure. You may not be afraid of poison, but you'll die as long as my fingers enter your eyes. That's because this corpse poison comes from hell. Xie Zhiqiu's entire martial power had transformed into the mountain-splitting palm and had pounded on Okufeng's body. However, his opponent's lightning-fast hands had also arrived in front of his eyes. Xie Zhiqiu raised his face. He was about to take Okufeng's attack in order to end his life. Chu Yang's sharp eyes saw that Okufeng's face was suffused with a ghastly green phosphorescence at this moment. He couldn't help but feel apprehensive in his heart. So, he subconsciously threw out his calamity sword. Sword Spirit cried out in alarm after Chu Yang had thrown out his calamity sword. Corpse poison. Be careful. Okufeng's fingers had barely touched Xie Zhiqiu's mask when they were chopped off by the calamity sword. Okufeng screamed in despair. His eyes emitted a ghastly green phosphorescence. Chu Yang flew up and grabbed the hilt of the calamity sword. Then, he ruthlessly inserted the tip of the sword into Okufeng's mouth. Okufeng's head suddenly burst open with a bang sound. His skull scattered in all directions. He had turned into a skeleton without the slightest bit of flesh, even before he had fallen to the ground. Then his body shriveled up in the blink of an eye and turned into a deathly pale skeleton. It seemed as if it had decayed for thousands of years. Then, it shattered with a crashing sound as it came into contact with the wind. The black dragon sword and the black saber fell on the roof with a clang sound. Okufeng's body quickly disintegrated. The wind blew away his ashes and scattered them in all directions. Then, the ashes began to corrode wherever they fell, and green smoke started to emit in bursts. Let's go quickly. Chu Yang shouted loudly. He rolled up his sleeves and rolled up the black dragon sword and the black saber. Then, he kicked Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang down. Then he also jumped down. Xie Zhiqiu followed closely behind him, and jumped down as well. They had barely reached the ground when they saw that a small hole had appeared on the roof of the roof. And a ray of light was being projected through this hole. This hole was getting bigger and bigger, and was slowly expanding. This poison is very powerful. Xie Zhiqiu was flabbergasted. This is corpse poison. Our medicines can't restrain this poison. Everyone quickly disperse. Chu Yang loudly shouted. More than 200 experts scattered in all directions, as if they had seen a ghost. Xie Zhiqiu then ordered, everyone, go and kill the remnants of the O clan. Don't let any of them escape. Everyone roared in agreement, and flew out one after another. Chu Yang sighed, and didn't speak anything. There was no such thing as a woman's benevolence in the upper three heavens. After all, one couldn't be careless when it came to a clan like the O clan. And they might be able to take revenge in case someone managed to escape with the poison technique. Poison was the most dreadful thing in the world. Chu Yang wouldn't bring a clan extermination crisis to his allies, just because he couldn't bear it. Blood-curdling screams resounded from all directions. Chu Yang and the others were watching from where they were. The roof of the main hall was slowly decaying, and the decaying speed slowed down after a big hole had formed in it. Those rotten things had turned into air. Not even a speck of dust was left behind. What a powerful poison! Xie Zhiqiu gasped. He suddenly recalled that Okufeng had stabbed him with his finger. So, he couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. He turned around and grabbed Chu Yang's hand. He then excitedly said, Minister Chu, you saved my life again. Elder Xie's words are too serious. Chu Yang slightly smiled. Chu Yang felt a chill in his heart as he looked at the tyrannical nature of this poison. Xie Zhiqiu wiped his sweat and said, I can't thank you enough for your kindness. Little brother, I won't mention it since you don't want to mention it. I only hope that you will remember this. My Xie clan will always be Minister Chu's ally. Minister Chu will die 10,000 deaths if he has any request. Chu Yang blinked. Then, he suddenly smiled and said, Elder Xie, I have no choice but to be thick-skinned and make a request since you are so grateful to me. Xie Zhiqiu laughed and said, just say it. I'll agree to it no matter what it is. Then you betroth your great-granddaughter Xie Danfeng to my junior martial brother Tan Tan. Chu Yang smiled and said, no problem at all. Xie Zhiqiu said with a smile. The two of them are in love with each other. I would have helped them even if you hadn't said it. What kind of request is this? Chu Yang faintly smiled and said, but this is also my request. The two of them looked at each other. They had a tacit understanding and laughed. Xie Zhiqiu was lying through his teeth. Tan Tan and Xie Danfeng were in love with each other. But they were far from being in love with each other. So it was more like they were enemies. They would fight whenever they met. Moreover, Tan Tan seemed to have some misgivings during this time. So he no longer mentioned this matter. However, Chu Yang could see the pain in his eyes from time to time. So, how could he not take this matter to heart? Then, everyone began to pack up the O clan's belongings. The carriages were packed up. Eventually, the carriages withdrew from the O clan's gate. But a huge fire had also started to burn in the O clan. The raging flames stretched for hundreds of miles. And half of the sky had turned red because of it. The O clan will no longer exist in the three heavens from now on. Chu Yang was walking at the end of the team. He turned around and looked at the magnificent flames. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Then he turned around and silently followed the team. The O clan was gone. The main clan was gone. So would the next target be the Tu clan? Or the Black Devil clan? Chapter 599. You. How can you do this without my consent? Tan Tan jumped up and down. He was flustered and exasperated. His two strange eyebrows almost jumped out of his face as he said, You are too much. Too much. Just like that. You promised the lifelong happiness of your one and only junior martial brother to someone else. I want to have a duel with you. Chu Yang rolled his eyes, but didn't say anything. He pretended as if he hadn't heard anything. This guy had started to jump up and down, and chatter incessantly ever since Chu Yang had returned and found out that Chu Yang had arranged a marriage for him. He had been harassing Chu Yang since the early morning, and it was already afternoon now. Chu Yang pretended as if this person didn't exist in front of him. He concentrated on helping the sword spirit pick up the harvest this time. All the gold and silver treasures belonged to the Xie clan. Then, they were randomly distributed among the experts who had come to help them. However, all the rare materials and treasures belonged to Chu Yang. The sword spirit in the tribulation space was very excited. Tan Tan was indeed panicking. He paced back and forth in the room. He suddenly turned around, and suddenly turned around. He scratched his ears and cheeks and frowned miserably. His face wrinkled like a cigar. He looked extremely anxious. Gu Du Xing, Dong Wushang, GMO, Luo Kudi, Rui Butong, and Ao Xie foolishly looked at Tan Tan pacing back and forth. They couldn't help but restrain their smiles. Is this guy really unwilling? Why? Tan Tan looked up and heaved a long sigh. Senior martial brother Chu Yang, oh, this is the matter of my generation. You didn't even discuss it with me. How can you decide on your own? I'm going crazy. Chu Yang rolled his eyes again, and changed his sitting position. Senior martial brother, you have to uphold justice for me. Tan Tan turned in front of Chu Yang, and swayed back and forth. Are you done yet? Chu Yang angrily glared at him. He then shouted, sit down. Tan Tan was startled. He looked at Chu Yang with a dumbfounded expression. Then, he sat down on the ground with a plop sound. Chu Yang finally finished counting the harvest. He suddenly stood up, and said with a fierce look on his face, who was the one talking in his sleep the night before yesterday? He said, Little Miss Xie Dan Feng, I want to consummate my marriage with you. Huh? Tan's face turned black and he panicked. I talked in my sleep? Did I talk in my sleep? You heard it. Humph. Chu Yang snorted and continued. 2 nights ago, someone was talking in his sleep. He said, Little Lady Dan Feng, luckily I don't have a fever anymore. Otherwise, you would have become barbecued meat the moment you married me. Tan Tan was at a loss as to what to do. He blinked his eyes and innocently said, Did I really say that? Chu Yang ignored him and continued. That day on the road, I passed by someone's tent and heard someone talking in his sleep. Xie Dan Feng, I miss you so much. Tan Tan was dumbfounded. He pointed at his own nose. Is it really me? Chu Yang nodded seriously. How am I supposed to meet people? Tan Tan covered his face. Suddenly the room burst into laughter. But I still can't. Tan Tan took his hand away. Then he became serious. Senior brother, I can't marry her. Why? Tan Tan's face was somewhat sad. It's not like you don't know my situation. The current me is a monster. I will harm others. Shut up. Chu Yang shouted. His eyes were dangerously close to him. Say one more word and I'll kill you. But Tan Tan pitifully said. My heart is a little. Shut up. Master isn't here. So I'm in charge of your affairs. Chu Yang snorted. He pointed his finger at Tan Tan's forehead, and Tan Tan immediately staggered. I said it's in charge. Understand? Tan Tan sighed in despair. As for your strange behavior, of course, you have to let her know. Chu Yang snorted and said, I believe that Xie Dan Feng won't care about that since she has taken a fancy to your appearance. The entire room burst into laughter as soon as he said this. Even Ao Xie, who had a lot on his mind, couldn't help but smile. Tan Tan scratched his head and sighed. I'm afraid that little lady Xie Dan Feng won't understand. Wouldn't that be? At this point, a clear and angry voice suddenly said, Who are you calling a little girl? Tan Tan was at a loss for words. Everyone followed the voice, and looked towards the entrance. They saw a graceful red-clothed woman standing outside the door. Her eyes seemed as if they were about to shoot fire as she looked at Tan Tan. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept in, and pushed Tan Tan to the ground. Then her fists fell on him like raindrops. Tan Tan clenched his teeth and asked, Who is this little girl? Who is a little lady? Tan Tan knew that he was in the wrong, so he didn't dare to fight back. He only screamed repeatedly. Bang bang bang. Heavy pounding sounds came from the places where Xie Dan Feng's fists and Tan Tan's body had collided. All the brothers were dumbfounded. Their faces were covered in cold sweat. She's really valiant. Such a daughter-in-law. except for Master Tan Tan. Everyone present would politely decline. They can't enjoy such luck with women. Jimo's eyes almost popped out. His face was full of horror. He secretly thought, Aobwa isn't like her, right? Is she the same? Isn't she the same? He suddenly sighed in grief. He almost cried when he thought of how he had fallen into Huyan Aobwa's hands. His heart ached. It seems that they are the same. Ah. He looked at Tan Tan, as if he was looking at his predecessor's example. The expression on Jimo's face suddenly became like that of a martyr. He almost stepped forward, hugged Tan Tan and cried, "Brother, we are the same. Ah." There were two people at the door who were similarly dumbfounded. They were the old ancestor of the Xie clan, Xie Zhiqiu, and the clan lord of the Xie clan, Xie Guang'an. Both of them had the same expression on their faces. Their eyes were wide open, and their mouths were wide open. They had a dull look on their faces as they looked at their great-granddaughter, violently beating up her fiancé. And this was happening in public. Xie Zhiqiu's face turned black on the spot. He ferociously looked at Xie Guang'an and angrily said, "You raised a good daughter." Xie Guang'an lowered his head in grievance. He then muttered, "This is inherited from my mother. It has nothing to do with me." Xie Zhiqiu became furious. He shouted, "Both mother and daughter are shrews." Xie Guang'an was submissive. He lowered his head and didn't say anything. He secretly curled his lips and said in his heart, "Old ancestor, you weren't necessarily that strong back then. I heard that you sometimes do martial art squats on top of the urinal. Do you think I don't know?" A series of banging sounds came from the room. Tan Tan had finally become angry. "Get up quickly. You're not done yet, are you? Master Tan is embarrassed to teach a lesson to a woman like you. Don't reach for a yard after taking an inch." Tan Tan angrily said, "Be careful or I'll flip out." Xie Danfeng had almost vented her anger. She was about to stop, but she became even angrier when she heard these words. So she shouted, "You dare to flip out? Well, flip out for this old woman to see." "Ugly woman, little mother's skin." Tan Tan shouted, "Ugly freak. I'll kill you." Xie Danfeng didn't give in. Xie Zhiqiu and Xie Guang'an couldn't watch any longer. They shouted at the same time, "Stop." They had only shouted one word when they shut their mouths. Then, they opened their eyes wide again. They saw Tan Tan roar loudly. He twisted his waist and exerted his strength with his arms. Then he pressed Xie Danfeng down with a plop sound. He then sat his buttocks on Xie Danfeng's belly. Then he said with an evil grin, "I'm a dignified man. But I can't deal with you, little mother's skin." He clenched his fists and pounded them down like raindrops. He didn't care about her head or face. Bang bang bang, bang bang bang. Xie Danfeng screamed, "Ugly freak! You ugly freak! You dare to hit me! You dare to hit this old woman! You!" However, Tan Tan turned a deaf ear to her. He had hit enough in front of her. So he turned around and slapped her plump buttocks with his palms. She was slapped until her buttocks rolled like waves. Chu Yang and the others inside the room, and Xie Zhiqiu and Xie Guang'an outside the room, closed their eyes in unison. This is an eyesore. This is a scandal. GMO closed his eyes. The muscles on his face twitched and twitched. A feeling of worship rose from the bottom of his heart. My idol. He's a real man. This is fucking hard to die. If I can do this to Aobwa, I won't have any complaints even if I die, Xie Danfeng screamed. But Tan Tan's cultivation was far superior to hers. So she felt as if a mountain was pressing down on her body. Xie Danfeng couldn't bear it anymore. She shouted, "I submit. I'm impressed by you. Bastard, why haven't you let go of me yet?" Chu Yang closed his eyes. His cheeks also trembled. The woman who can make Tan Tan take a liking to her is truly extraordinary. Let's not talk about the world-shaking fight. But she still begs for mercy. Once she falls into a disadvantageous position, who would beg for mercy in such a situation if it were any other woman? What a pair of weirdos. However, Tan Tan still didn't give up. He scowled and asked, "Are you convinced?" Xie Danfeng gasped for breath. "I'm convinced. This old woman is convinced." Tan Tan finally stopped. But he still rode on her body like a tiger. Then, he asked in a heroic and spirited manner. Who has the final say in our family when we get married? I have the final say. Xie Danfeng scowled and gnashed her teeth. This is a matter of principle. So I can't give even an inch. Bang bang bang. Tan Tan continued to beat her up. Then he asked again, say it again. Who has the final say? I have the final say. I have the final say. Xie Danfeng would rather die than submit. She ferociously looked at Tan Tan. You ugly bastard. Even if you beat me to death, I still have the final say. I don't believe that I can't beat you. Tan Tan was furious. His two iron fists pounded down with a rumbling sound. He panted for breath. Who has the final say? Who has the final say? Boo-hoo, you ugly bastard. Xie Danfeng cried. You have the final say for the time being. After a few days, whoever's fist is harder will have the final say. Wait until I beat you. Then I will have the final say. Humph. You still want to beat me? You don't stand a chance in this generation. Tan Tan raised his eyebrows and said in a fiendish manner. Are you sure you want to marry me? You want to be my wife? Dong Wuxiang smashed his head on the table with a bang. Then, his head bounced back and forth a few times as if he was in a free fall. Xie Danfeng didn't submit. Instead, this old woman submitted. Motherfucker. How can you ask your wife like this? Humph. Xie Danfeng pouted and turned her head away. However, she said fiercely, if I don't marry you, I'm afraid that you'll be a bachelor for the rest of your life. This old woman is being kind. Don't think that this old woman likes you. Gu Duxing and Ao Xiaoyan also smashed their heads on the table with a bang. Tears streamed down their faces. We also submit. Good. Tan Tan shouted. I have many problems. Are you sure you won't regret it? Xie Danfeng wiped her tears and sobbed. This old woman is very regretful right now. You're not allowed to regret it, Tan Tan said angrily. Say it. Do you regret it? Chu Yang and the others rolled their eyes at the same time. Their bodies twitched and they collectively fainted. Chapter 600. What a scandal! What a scandal! Xie Zhiqiu blew his beard and glared. His old face looked like charcoal. This is the misfortune of our clan. This old man is furious. Xie Guangyan was standing straight in front of him. He was constantly wiping his sweat. He was enduring the anger of the old ancestor. Xie Danfeng and Tan Tan were standing on the side. Their faces were also bruised and swollen. Chu Yang and the others had a serious look on their faces. They were sitting upright and still. They were looking straight ahead. This old man hasn't been in charge of the clan for several years. I didn't expect that the daughter of the clan would be taught by you to become like this. Xie Zhiqiu pointed at Xie Guangyan with bitter hatred. His finger trembled. Look at what you've done. Xie Guangyan lowered his head deeply. He didn't dare to utter a word. Xie Danfeng bit her lip. She timidly walked over and held Xie Zhiqiu's arm. She shook it and acted like a spoiled child. Old ancestor. Chu Yang and the others got goosebumps all over their bodies. This tigress can also act like a spoiled child. Xie Zhiqiu was even more unbearable. His whole body trembled, and his face turned ashen. Don't call me Danfeng. Danfeng. Xie Zhiqiu's whole body trembled. He was on the verge of tears. I saw that you were cute and lovable when you were a child. So, I liked you very much. I didn't expect that your father would teach you to become like this. This old man is heartbroken. Xie Guangyan opened his mouth wide. How can you blame me? This don't tell me that I don't want my daughter to be a virtuous woman? But this girl is like this. What can I do? However, even though he opened his mouth, he didn't dare to say anything. The consequences would be very serious if he were to say these words. Even if the old ancestor didn't get angry, his daughter and her mother would skin him alive. Minister Chu. Xie Zhiqiu shamefully looked at Chu Yang. His old face was as red as a monkey's, but the misfortune of our clan has made you laugh. Chu Yang forced a smile. It's nothing. Miss Danfeng's character is straightforward, cheerful and generous. She's a rare woman of Jianghu. Xie Zhiqiu's old face turned red. He coughed a few times. She is a barbaric and a little silly. What's with her straightforwardness and generous? He blinked and said, so this marriage, is it still valid? As he spoke, his face turned red. She thought in her heart, I wasn't very satisfied at first. I felt that this fresh flower was stuck in cow dung. But now it seems that this fresh flower and cow dung should be reversed. It's already a blessing that he's willing to take this crazy girl. After all, there won't be another shop after this village. My great-granddaughter may have to stay at home forever if this Tan Tan doesn't want her. Of course I will. Chu Yang replied in a righteous and resolute manner. That's great, that's great. Xie Zhiqiu felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. His smile became even more cordial as he said with curved eyes, "It seems to me that these two are a match made in heaven. It's simply a heaven-sent match. Since that's the case," he turned his head and said in a dignified tone, "Guang-en, do you have the token with you?" Xie Guang-en felt aggrieved. Since ancient times, when would the woman take out the token of marriage first? The man would ask a matchmaker to come first. Then he would discuss the marriage. The woman would refuse even if she was very willing. Then, the second matchmaker would be chosen. The third matchmaker would then decide the marriage. The man would then present a monetary gift as a betrothal gift for the 3 matchmakers. Finally, the 8 characters would be matched, and the woman would exchange the token of marriage. This is a done deal. How can it be that my daughter has to take out the token of marriage first? What is this saying? This. Xie Guang-en fumbled around his body. In fact, he had it with him. But he had to make a gesture. "Father." Xie Danfeng stamped her foot. "What's wrong with you? This is such a big matter. How can you forget where to put such an important thing?" Xie Guang-en's face turned black. He had no other choice but to say, "Let me look for it." "I'll help you look for it." Xie Danfeng rushed forward like an arrow. Then, she stretched her hand into her father's bosom and complained, This is related to your daughter's lifelong happiness. How can you be a father like this?" Xie Guang-en almost fainted from anger. "We haven't even gotten engaged yet. But you're already helping an outsider? Aren't I just picking a fight? Isn't this for your own good? You can't wait any longer. So, you're directly going to take my pocket? Look at you. You haven't even married into the family. But you've already been beaten black and blue. So you're in such a hurry to get married? You want to get beaten up? This is preposterous." Xie Danfeng didn't get enough time to stop her. She had already turned her father's pocket upside down. And a pile of things fell out with a crashing sound. Xie Danfeng picked them up and held them in her bosom. Then she happily ran to Tan Tan. She pulled him, and the two of them sat down. Look. Which one do you think is good? Which one is suitable?" Xie Danfeng happily fiddled with it. Then, she conveniently picked up a purple jade pendant. She turned it over and over, and looked at it. "This one is very suitable for me to hang." Then, she stuffed it into her pocket. Then she grabbed another one. "This one is for you. I want this one. This one is for you. This one." All the things in Xie Guang'en's pocket were divided between Tan Tan and Xie Danfeng in an instant. Tan Tan's bosom was full. He somewhat hesitated and said, "This isn't very good, right?" Tan Tan didn't know much about the ways of the world, but he still felt that it wasn't right to plunder his father-in-law's belongings before they got married. "What's not good about it?" Xie Danfeng chuckled. Then she scolded, "You idiot! This old lady will marry into the world-defying stage heavens. This is a betrothal gift. But, this is the only time you will get a dowry at most. You can't do anything else. My stingy father may not even give you anything if we act too late. You can go and cry at that time." Tan Tan's eyes lit up. He touched his chin and said, "These words are very reasonable." Xie Guang'en's entire body trembled. He angrily said, You evil creature. Are you even a little bit like a girl? You actually." He was so angry that white foam came out of the corners of his mouth. It seemed that he was about to faint. "Father," Xie Danfeng said with dissatisfaction, "your daughter will have to live by herself after she gets married. Do you have the heart to watch your daughter live a difficult life and not eat?" Xie Guang'en's complexion turned ashen. He coldly snorted, and didn't say anything else. He flicked his sleeves and stormed out of the door. He was so angry that he almost fainted. He didn't even greet the old ancestor before he left. Chu Yang took out his hand from his bosom. He had an innocent look on his face. He had wanted to give a betrothal gift for his junior martial brother. But he hadn't expected that Tan Tan's wife would take care of it. Not only did he not spend a single cent, but she also almost made his father-in-law go out naked. Xie Zhiqiu was relieved. "I've finally sold this scourge." He twirled his beard and said, "Minister Chu, you see, the Jianghu is in turmoil now. So it's better to get married as soon as possible." Chu Yang understood the meaning behind his words. He repeatedly nodded in agreement. "Old ancestor, you're right. We must get this matter done as soon as possible." Xie Zhiqiu laughed. "That's exactly what I want. You see, let Tan Tan stay here. Then, we'll wait for Dan Xiong to come back every half-month or 20 days. How about that?" Chu Yang was startled. "So fast. I must inform Master about this matter no matter what. Meng Chao Ran won't be present when Tan Tan gets married." Chu Yang could imagine that Meng Chao Ran will beat his buttocks until they become as big as a wash basin. "I will report this matter to Master as soon as possible," Chu Yang hastily said. "Well, that's it. I'll wait for your good news." Xie Zhiqiu stood up in a sanctimonious manner. He then got ready to leave. "Dan Feng, come back with me." "No, I want to stay here." Xie Dan Feng didn't want to comply. Xie Zhiqiu frowned. "What a scandal! You're about to get married. Why don't you hurry back home and learn how to be a wife and a mother from your mother? You're not allowed to show your face before you get married." Xie Dan Feng raised her head and said, "Today's marriage has been decided. So, your granddaughter belongs to someone else. You're a member of the Tan clan. So, I naturally have to stay in the Tan clan. Old ancestor, you haven't given your new great-grandson-in-law a gift for your first meeting." Xie Zhiqiu finally realized how Xie Guangin had felt a moment ago. His old face turned into charcoal in an instant. He snorted. His face was full of confusion and shame. "I've made a fool of myself in front of Minister Chu." Chu Yang forced a smile and cupped his hands in obeisance. "It's nothing. Let young Miss Xie talk here for a while. Cough cough. We'll send young Miss Xie back in a while." Xie Zhiqiu shook his head and heaved a long sigh. Then he shook his head again and sighed again. He was obviously very confused. He sighed more than a dozen times in a row. Then his body swayed, and he disappeared without a trace. Xie Dan Feng chased after him. "Old ancestor, you haven't given your gift yet. Don't tell me you don't want to?" A plop sound was heard from afar. It seemed as if something had fallen from a high place. Or someone had fallen down. Bursts of laughter were heard from behind. Xie Dan Feng suddenly turned her head. She wiped her sweat and patted her chest as she said, "I finally got rid of them." Then, she suddenly raised her willow-shaped eyebrows and opened her almond-shaped eyes wide. She then shouted loudly, "Tan Tan, you bastard! Why haven't you confessed yet?" She clenched her teeth and approached him step by step. "What's so unusual about you? You said that you're a monster?" Tan Tan was startled. He said, What's wrong with you?" "Humph. We've been here for a while. So, I've heard most of what you said." Xie Dan Feng roared. "Why do you think I made old ancestor and the others leave in such a hurry? Wasn't it because I was afraid that they would ask about your abnormality? You're a blockhead. You don't know how to turn things around. What will you do if you screw things up?" Gu Du Xing and the others were startled. This girl isn't stupid, ah. However, they saw that Xie Dan Feng had already pulled Tan Tan's ear and was walking towards the inner room. Come. You tell me everything." "Awesome." GMO wiped his sweat and gave a thumbs up. "Big brother, your junior martial brother's wife is a big girl. She's not simple." Chu Yang snorted and rolled his eyes as he said, "Nonsense. You are the younger brothers of aristocratic clans. Who among you is a real fool?" Everyone laughed. Then, they heard Xie Dan Feng's piercing voice coming from the inner room. "What's wrong with this? Isn't it just not eating? What's wrong with eating inner cores of spirit beasts? Other people can't even bear to eat them. This shows that you have extraordinary innate talent." Chu Yang and the others collectively felt the urge to faint as they heard this. Patting sounds were heard. It should be Xie Dan Feng patting Tan Tan's shoulder. "Don't worry. It doesn't matter what you eat as long as you don't eat shit. I'll accept it. Isn't it just the inner cores of spirit beasts? I'll go to the clan's treasure house later As for my dowry, I don't want anything else. I'll take away all the inner cores. Then they heard Tan Tan cheering, "Long live my wife!" Outside, the 7 brothers rolled their eyes and twitched, as if they were dead. They were the best couple. To be continued. Chapter 601. Tan Tan's matter was finally settled. Chu Yang had also put down a load on his mind. He had originally thought that Xie Danfeng would find it difficult to accept Tan Tan's strangeness. But now, it seemed that his worries were groundless. He didn't need to do anything. Xie Danfeng had understood everything on her own. She had thought it through, accepted it, and acted as if nothing had happened. She had even added the words gifted. Chu Yang couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He muttered, "In the past, we always thought that some things were very difficult. So we always had misgivings. We didn't dare to do it. We even created difficulties for ourselves. Therefore, this made this matter even more difficult to handle. But, if we don't think about anything and just let nature take its course, we will find that this matter is actually a smooth road. Everything will come naturally when the conditions are right. We don't even need to spend any effort to solve it." He heaved a long sigh of relief. Tan Tan's marriage is like this. And our martial path is also like this. The brothers had been laughing at first, but they quieted down when they heard these words. They slowly thought about it, and seemed to have understood something. Gu Duxing slowly nodded and said, "That's right. For a martial artist, revered martial artist is undoubtedly an unattainable goal. And for revered martial artists, emperor level and monarch level are legends. But for monarch level, supreme level is even more of a myth. Therefore, you can never climb up a level when you regard it as a myth. That's because you regard it as unsurpassable. This is an inner demon." Chu Yang nodded and said, "Yes. So we only need to cultivate step by step. We don't need to care about the level of king level or emperor level. We only need to take one step at a time. It's just like life. We have to walk. So, why should we care about the next step since we have to walk?" Dong Wushang, GMO, and the others lowered their heads and pondered carefully. The reason was very simple, but it was very difficult to think of it. And it was even more difficult to do it even if they thought of it. But it was just as Chu Yang had said. If you don't do it because it's difficult, then you will never succeed. Just keep your head down and move forward. You have to take that step no matter where you go. Why should you care about monarch level or supreme level? When one truly reaches the end of one's life, even if one was only a warrior in one's lifetime, it would still be the end. Supreme level, you will also reach the end. What was the difference? The atmosphere in the room became quiet. "Let's talk about the next step." Chu Yang clapped his hands and said, "You two come out." Xie Danfeng and Tan Tan came out with red faces. Xie Danfeng blushed when she saw Chu Yang and the others. She hurriedly said, "I'm going back." Then, he dashed out like he was flying. "Take care," the brothers said in unison. A coquettish voice came from outside. "We have already exterminated the O clan. I believe that this news will shake the entire heavens within 3 days." Chu Yang slowly said, "It can be said that the extermination of the O clan will cause an explosion in the Jianghu. When the time comes, we must be prepared to welcome this storm." The few of them were silent, but their eyes were shining brightly. "This 3 days storm is an opportunity for our clans." Gu Duxing pondered for a while and slowly said, "That's right. This is the biggest challenge, the biggest crisis, and also the biggest opportunity that our clans will have to face in the last 100 years apart from Ao clan." Luo Kudi also put away his usual cynicism. Ao Xieyin took a deep breath and said, "This is a fierce battle for my Ao clan. And it's also a revenge. It's not an opportunity. However, my Ao clan can give up everything in this battle. But we have to vent our anger. We must take revenge." "No," Chu Yang insipidly said. "This isn't just our opportunity. It's also the biggest opportunity for your Ao clan. Therefore, I suggest that you don't show up. It's not purely because of your Ao clan. There are other reasons." "Other reasons?" Ao Xieyin wrinkled his brows. "Yes, your Ao clan is a big clan. How many direct descendants do you have in your generation?" Chu Yang asked. There should be more than 100 people if you count the descendants of my uncles and other clans. Ao Yin replied. How many of them are outstanding? Chu Yang asked. Ao Yin seemed to have understood something. But he didn't hesitate and said, there are others besides me. He had already understood Chu Yang's meaning. He took a deep breath and said, Ancestor once said that Ao Yin is the strongest among the 7 tigers of the Ao clan. But everyone else can assume the position of the clan lord. And the Ao clan's reputation won't decline. Well, do you think that the remaining people will fight for the position of the clan lord if you die? Chu Yang insipidly said. That's inevitable. Ao Yin heaved a long sigh. He somewhat bitterly said. They are eyeing me covetously even now. They will fight to the death if I'm gone. The Ao clan would have been powerful for a while. But I'm afraid that its vitality would have been greatly damaged. So this is your opportunity. And it's also Ao clan's opportunity, Chu Yang insipidly said. But these disturbances can be quelled as long as I go back now, Ao Yin solemnly said. He suddenly had a thought of overturning his decision at this moment. Ao clan will be finished if you go back. Chu Yang's tone was still dull. Ao Yin was startled, but he immediately understood. He was in a daze for a long time. Then he muttered, that's right. Ao clan will be finished if I go back. It still exists now, but it will be destroyed by my hands sooner or later. Chu Yang nodded. Ao Yin dejectedly sat down. He then said in a low voice, don't tell me that I can only watch? Chu Yang deeply looked at him and said, if you don't watch now, you can only endure it in the future. Ao Yin remained silent. GMO and Luo Kudi were confused as they heard this. They asked Gu Duxing, what are they talking about? Why can't we understand anything? Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang looked at these two people and exposed an envious look. These two people didn't have the slightest desire for power. They didn't participate in the clan's struggle for fame and fortune. They were living an extremely relaxed life. A person's ambition is limitless. The 7 clan lords of the same generation of the same clan are the biggest crisis of this clan. Their ambition will slowly expand as they slowly gain strength. And Ao clan will be divided into 7 clans when it reaches a certain extent. And it will be done for. So it's best to expose them as soon as possible. Gu Duxing slowly said. It's too complicated. GMO curled his lips and said, that bastard Jizhu almost knelt down in front of me and asked me to go back to be the clan lord. But I always run far away and ignore him. Dong Wuxiang sighed. Ao Yin can't go. He will stay in the Xie clan. Tan, what about you? Chu Yang asked. Me. I will stay. Tan considered for a while. Then he made a decision. I feel that my spirit fluctuations are very strong recently. I will stay here. I will follow the Xie clan's operation. There shouldn't be any problem. Chu Yang looked at him worriedly and said, all right. Duxing needs to go back to the Gu clan. Wuxiang, GMO, and Kudi also need to go back to their respective clans. I want to go to the Mo clan to see Mo Tianji. Chu Yang said, Butong, you stay in the Xie clan. First, you have to keep an eye on Tan. Second, you have to help Ao Yin conceal his identity. Third, you have to wait for Xie Danxiong to come back. Then, you guys can discuss the operation with him. Rui Butong agreed. But you have to remember. Chu Yang looked at Ao Yin and Rui Butong. First, you can't fall behind in your cultivation. Second, you can't touch the Xie clan. You have to wait until the all-out war starts in 3 days. Then you can make a decision. Good. Ao Yin's face revealed a contemplative look. We will wait for your news. Good. Chu Yang turned around. There's no time to lose. Let's act immediately. The 5 of us can travel together for some time. We can also avoid a lot of things along the way. Chu Yang had said the last sentence somewhat meaningfully. It seemed to have some other meaning. Dong Wuxiang was silent for a while. Then he said, Big brother, I want to act alone. Chu Yang's gaze focused. Are you sure? Dong Wuxiang took a deep breath and said, I'm sure. Chu Yang looked at him with a complicated look in his eyes. He nodded and said, Good. Be careful along the way. Big brother, we might as well all act alone. Gu Duxing said lightly. Traveling together is not conducive to cultivation. Besides, each of us has our own things to face. Although we can avoid a lot of trouble if we work together, some troubles can't be avoided. They will happen sooner or later. The sooner we solve them, the sooner we can get rid of our worries. Chu Yang was silent for a long time. Then he said, "But this journey is thousands of miles long. It's full of dangers. There's a big clan eyeing us covetously. Once, Big Brother, have you forgotten that you single-handedly fought your way through thousands of miles in the lower three heavens?" Gu Duxing laughed heartily. Then, he suddenly said solemnly, "Big Brother, you have good intentions. But, you can't always protect us like an old hen protecting its chicks. That way we will all be crippled. Everyone has their own heart knot and story. We also have our own destiny to face. Or the so-called crisis is the brilliance of everyone's life." Gu Duxing looked at Chu Yang and said cautiously, "Big Brother, we can't be together for a long time." Chu Yang was silent for a long time. Then he finally nodded and said, "I worry too much. This is the weakness of my character. Once we have something, we are afraid of losing it. But if we have it for a long time, we will lose that kind of passion. Forget it, forget it. I'll leave it to you guys." Gu Duxing straightened his body and said seriously, "Thank you, Big Brother." Chu Yang smiled and patted his shoulder. "Don't be so serious. I understand what you're saying." Everyone laughed. Chu Yang suddenly reflected on himself. Indeed, he had lost too much in his previous life. His loved ones, he had nothing. But this had created his success in this life. But it had also created another kind of extreme character in him. And that was his desire to protect the people around him was too strong. He was afraid that something would happen to them, and it would be too late for regrets. He didn't want to lose what he had. This was a kind of responsibility, but it was also a drawback. For mediocre people, he was absolutely responsible. But, for geniuses, this kind of extreme responsibility was another kind of extreme irresponsibility. Chapter 602. However, the consequences of doing so would stifle the individuality of the brothers. People like Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang would never reach a higher level if they were to grow up under the protection of others. Although each of them would encounter a life and death crisis more than once after separating, they had to be separated. What Gu Duxing said was right. Everyone has their own wonderful life. Even if they were to die, Gu Duxing had deliberately mentioned this in such a chaotic time. He had the intention of using a mountain of knives and a sea of flames to gain experience. Good. Then we will go our separate ways. Chu Yang had already made up his mind. He smiled and said, "Well, I will go and see Albo first. Then I will go back to the clan from Albo's place." GMO excitedly shook his eyebrows. Luo could be ridiculed. Looking at Xia Danfeng is equivalent to looking at your Albo. In other words, it's a matter of the banquet table and the underworld. Your Albo is fierce, but it's still slightly inferior to sister-in-law Tan. That's not necessarily true. Rui Butong immediately retorted with righteous indignation. Albo is much fiercer than sister-in-law Tan. Just that small kick is as thick as third brother G's waist. Everyone immediately laughed. GMO glared at them. Then he rolled his eyes. No one knew what he had thought of. He pulled Chu Yang to the side sneakily and asked mysteriously, "Big Brother, that medicine of yours, is it useful for normal people?" "Medicine?" Chu Yang looked at him confusedly. "Oh." GMO tilted his head and looked. Then he moved closer to Chu Yang's ear. "Is that the medicine you used to treat Luo Kudi's illness? Is it useful for me?" "It is said that it is useful. It can double your strength." Chu Yang looked at him vigilantly. "What do you want to do?" GMO immediately jumped up excitedly. Big Brother, give me a bottle. Give me a bottle. I want to completely subdue that tigress." Chu Yang frowned. "No." GMO's face fell. He begged, "Big Brother." Then he begged and winked at him. Chu Yang shivered all over. "Here you go." Then he took out a small jade bottle and handed it to GMO. "You first try it, cough cough, if then, huh? Understood?" "Understood. Understood." GMO beamed with delight. He placed the jade bottle in his bosom like it was a precious treasure. His eyes were shining with longing. He turned his head. and saw that everyone was looking at him suspiciously. GMO snorted, and his face immediately darkened. He coughed a few times, cupped his fists, and saluted everyone. Then he said with a serious face, "Brothers, since everyone is moving separately, I won't be going the same way as you. So I'll go first. Ha ha ha." As he spoke, he put down his hand and rubbed his crotch without leaving a trace. With a whoosh he dashed out. Chu Yang shook his head. "Are you that impatient? Look at how useless he is then." Another one jumped out impatiently. "Boss brothers, I'll take my leave too." Luo Kadi was laughing like a Methria Buddha. This guy had been setting up his tent for several days, and he was getting more and more uncomfortable. Now that GMO had left, he jumped out on his own. "Little Lu." Before Chu Yang could finish his sentence, Luo Kadi had already disappeared. From afar, a burst of excited and lewd laughter could be heard. Chu Yang and the others had black lines on their faces. Gu Duxing was moved. Thinking that he was already a sword emperor, and thinking of his promise with sister Xiao Miao, he couldn't help but feel a fire in his heart. He wanted to go home as soon as possible. Licking his lips, he said, "Boss, then. I'll take my leave too." Chu Yang looked at him strangely. He smiled and said, Sister Xiao Miao made you unable to control yourself?" Gu Duxing's cold face suddenly turned into a ripe persimmon. Even his scalp became hot. His face and neck turned red. Just he wanted to say no. But he couldn't lie to his heart. Finally he said angrily, "Let's go." With a whoosh, he turned into a ball of sword light. "Boss, don't worry. I'll go too." Dong Wushang's eyes flashed with passion. "Wushang, you have to be careful." The one Chu Yang was most worried about was Dong Wushang. "Yes, I understand." Dong Wushang nodded deeply and said, "I'll live to meet you guys." Dong Wushang turned around, carrying the black saber on his back. His strong back view walked out step by step. Ao Xia Yin watched everyone leave. He couldn't help but sigh and say, "The relationship between you brothers is really good." He smiled enviously. "Each of you can find a reason to dilute each other's sorrow when parting. This is only a small matter, but it can be seen that each of you has taken each other to heart. No matter what, you're always thinking of your brothers. This is what brothers are like." Chu Yang looked outside the door. He then said in a somewhat absent-minded manner, "Haha, Ao Xia Yin, your Ao clan wouldn't have any internal and external troubles if 2 of your 7 clan brothers could be like this." "Yes," Ao Xia Yin smiled bitterly. "Even if there is one, I can't get it even in my dreams. They only have eyes for the position of young clan lord under my butt. They don't care about me, Ao Xia Yin." Chu Yang silently said, "A big clan is the same as an imperial family. The emperor will feel a lot more comfortable if only one person is a genius. But if several emperors are geniuses, and all of them have the wisdom to bring peace to the country, and they don't want to be left out, then it will be a sign of decline even if all of the emperors are geniuses. 7 geniuses have appeared in your Ao clan. Perhaps the elders of your clan are very gratified. They think that your Ao clan can stand tall and never fall from now on. But I want to say that it's the opposite. Your Ao clan is already on the verge of such a decline. Ao Xia Yin, I'm afraid that your Ao clan's downfall would have been imminent if you hadn't hardened your heart and restrained it early on." Chu Yang said softly. Ao Xia Yin was frightened. He couldn't help but deeply bow. "I've learned something. Well, I'm also leaving. I'm going to see what Mo Tianji is up to." Chu Yang waved his hand. "Xie Danxiong should be coming back from Ao clan soon. You two should be able to confirm many things by chatting." Ao Xia Yin nodded with a serious look on his face. Tan, you must take care of yourself." Chu Yang walked out of the door. He didn't turn his head back, and slowly said. Tan nodded with all his might. He knew what Chu Yang meant by take care. Perhaps only he and Chu Yang could understand the meaning of these words. This take care wasn't take care of your life. Moreover, Tan, you must upgrade Butong's strength. Chu Yang flew up after he finished saying this. He then left behind a few words. "Say goodbye to the people of the Xie clan on my behalf. I'm leaving first." Ao Xia Yin looked at Chu Yang's departing figure. He secretly swore in his heart. Not only Rue Butong's strength, I must also upgrade my strength. He didn't notice that Rui Butong's expression seemed as if he was about to cry after Chu Yang had finished speaking. Rui Butong found out that Ao Xia Yin was going to participate in the special training. He immediately became spirited. Are you sure? Of course. Ao Xia Yin replied boldly. That's great. Rui Butong hugged him. He was crying in his heart. Finally, someone has come to court death. Ao Xia Yin felt that something was wrong. He asked tentatively, You won't cripple them, right? Tan Tan smiled honestly. He said honestly, Ha ha ha, it's all done in practice. It's very effective. Ao Xia Yin was relieved. Looking at this guy's honest face, he didn't seem to understand the ways of the world. He probably wouldn't go too far. Ao Xia Yin regretted his first morning of the special training less than a third of the time. Tan Tan, this bastard, actually stripped the two of them naked and tied them up to make them cultivate. Moreover, he had a strict goal. If they couldn't reach the goal, he would smear honey on their small breasts and throw them into the flowers. Ao Xia Yin broke down after only one round. From this moment on, Ao Xia Yin suddenly realized that he actually had such great potential. When he really went all out to cultivate, it turned out to be very fast. In the afternoon, he still cultivated like that. But Ao Xia Yin actually only used 2/3 of the time to complete the training goal. Then, he took pleasure in Rui Butong's misfortune. Rui Butong was trapped. His small breasts were dripping with honey as he was thrown into the flowers and screaming. Tan Tan's training method was very monotonous. It was undoubtedly much more boring than Chu Yang's. But it had incomparably good results. The second day was still the same training. Ao Xia Yin, the Grand Duke of a great clan in the three heavens, couldn't help but tremble when he saw Tan Tan's honest face. His face turned green. Tan Tan's most powerful words were, If you can't meet my requirements today, I will throw you naked into the flowers. Then, I will let Dan Feng bring her sisters to visit and practice painting. When Tan Tan said these words, his smile was very simple and honest. It was very pure. There was some expectation in his eyes. Ao Xia Yin and Rui Butong's hair stood on end. Ao Xia Yin went to get more. He had already scolded himself 1,000 times in 2 days. What special training? I really want to cry but have no tears. The news of the O clan's destruction spread throughout the three heavens like a hurricane. Dozens of clans were stupid. They wanted to make a move. Ao clan had found out that the O clan had joined forces with other clans to hunt down Ao Xia Yin a few days before the news of the O clan's destruction came. So the clan had an urgent discussion. They hadn't reached a conclusion when the news of the O clan's destruction came. The O clan was the only clan that the Ao clan had scruples about. Clan Lord Ao Tianxing had made a decision now that the powerful enemy was gone. The Ao clan had set out in full force under his command. The troops had left in a single file and had scattered into the Jianghu. Blood must be repaid in blood. Everyone in the alliance of the O clan was in danger after they found out that the O clan had been destroyed. They had banded together to protect themselves. At the same time, every clan had tried their best to send people out to look for reinforcements. In fact, however, the Jianghu was in turmoil because of the 3 words Heavenly Armament Pavilion. What kind of organization is this? It has the strength to destroy the O clan overnight? How strong is it? You don't know about this. Come listen to me. Mo Tianji had jumped up from his chair when he had received this news. He had rushed out barefoot and had shouted loudly. He had immediately invited Dong Wu Lei and the others over. This big storm had truly taken shape at this point. The power of this storm had affected everyone in the three heavens. The next step was to carefully plan. 2 chapters for today. To be continued. Chapter 603. The first thing to do after entering Jianghu is to find out if Ao Xia Yin is dead or alive. If he is dead, bring his body back and take revenge. If he is alive, bring him back and take revenge. These were the words that Ao Tianxing had said when his younger brothers had set out. There was only one thing. Ao Xia Yin must be brought back regardless of whether he was dead or alive. Moreover, the people who had attacked Ao Xia Yin must pay the price no matter what. If any of you dare to play any petty tricks, when you come back, what awaits you is your cultivation base being crippled. Don't think that we don't know what you are thinking. This was Ao Tianxing's warning to his nephew. The troops had already set out. Ao Tianxing asked, "Is Master Xie feeling better?" "Master Xie has already left." The servant reported. "Master Xie hasn't fully recovered yet. However, when he saw the current state of our Ao clan, he proposed to leave. Before he left, he said that he would inevitably make the clan master sad if he said goodbye to him in the current situation. Therefore he left directly." Ao Tianxing nodded. His heart was in a mess. Although Xie Danqiong left without saying goodbye, he was indeed considerate of his state of mind. After the arrangements were made, he went to the inner room. Then he entered a secret passage. The passage went downwards. After walking for an unknown distance, he arrived in front of a strange underground stone room. "Old ancestor, why did you insist on sending them out during this turmoil in Jianghu?" Ao Tianxing was somewhat puzzled and also somewhat resentful. There was a big room on the opposite side. The quality of the white crystal was very high. It was almost transparent. Looking in from the outside, one could almost see 3 vague figures. "You think that Xie Yin is definitely not dead, right?" After a long time, an old voice came from inside. "Yes," Ao Tianxing said. "We have already inquired about all kinds of information. Although the O clan, Black Devil clan, and other clans chased after Xie Yin, they didn't succeed. There are also rumors that Xie Yin was rescued by King of Hell Chu. I believe that these are not baseless rumors." The opposite side was silent. Suddenly, a long sigh was heard. Then another voice slowly said, "The 3 of us have been in seclusion here for 50 years. If we can't break through the barrier of 5th grade monarch level in a few more years, our lifetime achievements will stop here." He paused and said, "In other words, if we can't break through, the 3 of us will die within 20 years. His lifespan has reached its end." Ao Tianxing widened his eyes in shock. "How could this be? We definitely won't be able to protect the Ao clan for eternity. The future of the Ao clan lies in the hands of the younger generation." Another voice rang out coldly. "However, if you're disobedient and ambitious, you won't be able to use it no matter how capable you are. 7 geniuses have appeared in their generation. Ao clan is elated. They think that there is hope for their rise. However, the 3 of us are worried day and night." The cold voice said, "You must know that with a genius comes ambition and the desire for power. If Ao Xian isn't dead yet, let him use his methods to subdue these people, subdue them, or kill them. If he died, he would let these people fight amongst themselves. Even if there are losses because of this, it is inevitable. It is better than a split in the future. But if Ao Xian dies in their hands, there's nothing to say." The old ancestor who was the first to speak said indifferently, "This is an aristocratic family. There is no such thing as fairness. Everyone's wings are strong. If you want to rise, you have to show your ability." Ao Tianxing opened his mouth. There was a pained expression on his face. 7 outstanding younger brothers. How many of them would be left if this happened? "The 3 of us won't interfere in any case. We'll just wait for the result. As for you, you can also use your own methods. However, the guards of the clan master and the emperor-level experts can't be touched. The Black Star Guards and the Proud Eagle assassination team can't be touched. This is the foundation. It cannot be shaken. This is an opportunity. After this, the strength of the Ao clan will be greatly damaged. It may be quiet for a period of time. However, it will become more cohesive." The old ancestor said, "Tianxing, you must remember that the power that can make a clan rise isn't strength in numbers. It isn't strength in numbers. It isn't strength in the clan. It is cohesion. Although the Ao clan is now a big clan and is ranked first in the 3 heavens, it is too scattered." Ao Tianxing retreated with a heavy heart. "Xian, where are you? Are you still alive?" Outside the gate of the Ao clan, a group of people was ready to set off. There were 3 youngsters with warm smiles on their faces. All of them had handsome faces and elegant manners. They were tall and slender, looking like trees in the wind. They were the great dukes of the Ao clan. "Qing Yin, you must work hard. You'll make a contribution if you find Big Brother." "Haha." A youngster smiled amiably. "Meng Yin, you must also work hard. Perhaps this great contribution will be yours. Ao Qing Yun smiled modestly. The brothers were talking and laughing gently. They were amiably facing each other. However, a cold light would occasionally flash in each other's eyes. It was so ferocious and frightening. Everyone knew that this was an opportunity for them. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Let's go. It wasn't known who had spoken these words. But the impatient crowd dispersed. They quickly mounted their horses and started to laugh loudly. Their long robes fluttered in the wind. They formed a long line under the blue sky and green grass. They've returned. Mo Tianji looked at the two people in front of him. Only the three of them were present this time. Dong Wulei, Luo Kewu, and Mo Tianji. This was an extremely secluded tea room. I believe that you've all received the news. The Heavenly Armament Pavilion has returned and destroyed the O clan's lair. The remaining forces of the O clan had been reduced to less than 20 people in the alliance at this time. There's no need to fear them. Mo Tianji's face was calm and collected. He slowly said, King of Helchu's thunderous attack has thoroughly solved my biggest problem. The O clan is the reason why we haven't launched our attack yet. It's also the biggest reason why we haven't launched our attack yet. Adventurer, Mo Tianji insipidly said. This is what I meant when I said adventurer. Only King of Helchu could have done such a flawless job. Dong Wulei and Luo Kewu didn't speak. They knew that this wasn't the main point that Mo Tianji was talking about. Everyone knew this. It wasn't a secret. I want to remind you. Mo Tianji's eyes flickered. He gently tapped the table with his hand. It seemed that he didn't know what to say. But he eventually said, We need to be united. We'll be consigned to eternal damnation if there's any civil war. Jizhu Xiedan Qiong and the Gu clan don't have any problems. There's only the two of you. It seems that the enemy has fallen into a disadvantageous position. But you must know that the real strength of the Tian clan and the Black Devil clan hasn't been revealed yet. And the two clan is still hiding. Mo Tianji's eyes swept around. He looked at the two with his sharp eyes. I believe that both of you understand. Dong Wulei and Luo Kewu were lost in thought. A long while passed. Then Luo Kewu slowly said, I've never thought about this. You don't. But it doesn't mean that your subordinates don't. Mo Tianji snorted. He then looked at the two of them. I need to let you know that Luo Kedi is already a king-level expert. He's half a foot into the emperor-level expert. Dong Wushang is now an emperor-level expert. Moreover, he's a pure saber emperor. Mo Tianji looked at Dong Wulei and heavily said, Our big clan needs such strength at the moment. Dong Wulei's complexion changed. He slowly nodded and said in a heavy voice, Don't worry. I know what to do. Mo Tianji deeply looked at him and slowly said, I hope so. Dong Wulei and Luo Kewu rode their horses out of the Mo clan's residence. They were speechless. Both of them heaved a long sigh. A long while passed. Then, Luo Kewu cupped his hands in obeisance. Then he turned his horse around and left. He didn't say anything. Dong Wulei looked at the grass under his feet. His expression was somewhat frozen. It was complicated and contradictory. The muscles on his face were twitching and recovering. His eyebrows were tightly wrinkled. He trusted the reins of his horse to move forward. A long while passed. Then, he let out a long sigh and muttered, Saber Emperor. Saber Emperor. A radiant light flashed in the eyes of the four old men behind him. A long while passed. Then, Dong Wulei clamped his legs on the horse's belly. The horse let out a long neigh and galloped away. It left behind a mess of thoughts. The alliance of the O clan, Tian clan, Tu clan, and the other clans was in a gloomy atmosphere. The atmosphere was so heavy that it almost made people unable to breathe. They had just received a message. The two clans' various forces are under attack by the Ao clan. The Tian clan's various forces are under attack by the Ao clan. The Li clan is under attack by the Ao clan. The Zhao clan is under attack by the Ao clan. These attacks included military attacks, commercial blockades, shops embezzlement, and even their partners have been warned and attacked. It was an all-round and three-dimensional attack. Two of the Black Devil clan's branches had been uprooted by the Ao clan. The troops of the Ao clan had swept across the boundless earth like a raging tide. And internal strife had arisen on their side even before the war had started. The Meng clan had been uprooted by these people and had been exterminated. The O clan didn't exist anymore. Only O Qingwu and O Du Xiao were left. They were leading 20 or so battered soldiers. They were equivalent to 2 generals without an army. The troops dispatched by the Ao clan are respectively led by Ao Qingyun, Ao Qingyun, Ao Mengyun, Ao Yuyun, Ao Fengyun, and Ao Langyun. Tianbu Hui gently knocked on the table and slowly said, "The revenge of the Ao clan has already begun. In addition, the Mo clan, Xie clan, Ji clan, Luo clan, Dong clan, and Gu clan are also ready to make trouble. This matter has developed into a situation that we didn't want to happen. And it has reached an extremely bad situation. Everyone, please tell me your thoughts on how to deal with it." For a long time no one spoke. The Black Devil young master coldly snorted. Tianbu Hui suddenly raised his head and looked at the Black Devil young master with an ice-cold gaze. "I need to remind everyone that this is a critical moment for our survival. So, any disunity will lead to our destruction. Therefore, I ask everyone to be patient and control your mouths." He turned his head. "Brother Tu, how long will it take for the promised reinforcements to arrive?" Tu Qianhao confidently smiled and said, "My father and the old ancestor have gone there personally, so we should have news in a few days." Tianbu Hui slowly nodded and sighed. "I hope the sooner the better." To be continued. Chapter 604. The spokesperson had been O Du Xiao, who had organized this alliance. But it had been changed to Tianbu Hui now. It was obvious that the O clan no longer had any right to speak in this alliance after their clan had been destroyed. Moreover, the people of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion have separated. They are rushing back to their respective clans. Tianbu Hui calmed down and said, "We can't let these people go back. First, these people have ruined our plan. So we must take revenge for this blood feud. Second, they will use their understanding of us to attack us after they go back." Tianbu Hui's eyes narrowed into slits. Then, a cold light shot out from them. Who knows what that bastard Meng Luo said to them? It would be bad if he revealed our troop deployment and operation plan. We can't take this risk. Therefore, stopping these people is our top priority right now. Tianbu Hui and young Black Devil looked at each other and said, "Our O clan is responsible for King of Hell Chu." O Du Xiao clenched his teeth. His eyes were bloodshot. Both father and son had fainted on the spot when they had received the news that their clan had been destroyed. In their hearts, King of Hell Chu was the most hated person in the world. In fact, there was no one like him. "Well, do you want me to send a few more people to you?" Tianbu Hui asked symbolically. "No need." O Du Xiao gnashed his teeth in anger. "We will return with Chu Yang's head if we can kill him this time. But we will also leave our lives behind if we can't kill King of Hell Chu. Everything will be over." Tianbu Hui's eyes flashed. He then nodded with a smile. "Brother O will succeed." O Du Xiao snorted. He had heard the sarcasm in Tianbu Hui's words. But he couldn't care less about this at this time. "Our Tu clan will be responsible for Gu Du Xing." Tu Qianhao was still brooding over his last fight with Gu Du Xing. He wanted to take this opportunity to kill Gu Du Xing and announce to the world that I, Tu Qianhao, am the #1 expert of the younger generation. "I heard that Gu Du Xing has already broken through to Sword Emperor realm." Young Black Devil seemed to have unintentionally said something. "Tu Qianhao, what grade of king-level expert are you?" Tu Qianhao's face turned red. He then growled, "Even if he's the Sword Monarch, I want him dead this time." Tianbu Hui shot a warning glance at the Black Devil young master. Young Heimo laughed mischievously and said, "If that's the case, then I'll just kill Dong Wushang." "Kill Dong Wushang?" Tu Qianhao snorted. "He's a saber emperor. What grade of king level are you?" The Black Demon young master glared at him, and a cold light burst out from his eyes. "Tu Qianhao, do you want to die?" Everyone hurriedly tried to smooth things over. "Our Li clan will rob and kill GMO," the Li clan master said. "Zhao clan kill Luo Kadi," the patriarch of Zhao clan declared. "Don't forget to reorganize the troops at your rear." Tianbu Hui nodded and reminded them. Then he said, "Li Xiong Tu once owed me a huge favor. This time, I will personally go and look for Li Xiong too. Everyone's eyes lit up. If they could rope in the Li clan as well, everyone would have a much greater chance of success. There's no time to lose. Let's act now. Gu Duxing rushed through the mountain forest. His heart was burning with passion. He knew that there would be enemies along the way to intercept him. But he was confident that he could break through all the obstructions and rush back. He would rush to Sister Xiao Miao's side. Then, he would say to her, I want to marry you. I want to marry you now. You don't have to be afraid of anything with me by your side from now on. Gu Duxing didn't even feel the boredom of traveling alone for thousands of miles because of such a passionate mood. Looking at the scenery along the way, the scenery was also very beautiful. However, Gu Duxing didn't relax his vigilance because of this. He knew that this would be the best opportunity if the enemies wanted to eliminate him. And he also needed this kind of experiential training. Therefore, Gu Duxing wasn't the least bit surprised when 3 people suddenly appeared in front of him in the forest to block his path. He gently pulled out the black dragon sword and coldly asked, Are you 2 Qianhao's men? The 3 people opposite him didn't say a word and rushed forward. Gu Duxing coldly snorted. He turned over and leaped up. His body bent in the air and then straightened up. He looked like a sword that had been bent and then suddenly straightened up. The sword light scattered everywhere. The 3 people separated and then gathered together to block Gu Duxing. Then they started to fight. Gu Duxing's body rushed past them and turned into a black lightning. He flew out of the encirclement of the 3 people and disappeared into the forest without looking back. He disappeared with a schwa sound and left behind a sentence from afar. Not 2 Qianhao's men. The 3 people blocking the path stood there in a daze. Suddenly, a thin line of blood spurted out of their throats. Then, a column of blood shot their heads into the air. The 3 people fell down at the same time. Gu Duxing had killed 3 king-level experts with 1 sword and had escaped far away. After a long time, a rustling sound came from the forest, and a dozen people came out. They looked at the 3 corpses. The white-clothed youth in the middle softly sighed and muttered, What a terrifying sword emperor! The few people behind him had dignified faces and said, Young master, if the heavenly armament pavilion has such strength, I'm afraid the plan will be very difficult. The white-clothed youth slightly tilted his head and pondered. Then he insipidly said, What if you guys fight him? The people behind him looked at each other. They were silent for a while. Then one of them said, If it's one-on-one, I'm afraid that no one will be his match except for Big Brother. The white-clothed youth's body suddenly shook. The lowest among you guys is a 2nd-grade emperor-level expert, and the highest is a 5th-grade emperor-level expert. Why can't you beat a 1st-grade sword emperor? His voice was full of disbelief. If it's a competition of cultivation, each of us can fight him to death. But he's a sword emperor. A sword emperor is completely different from an ordinary emperor-level expert. An old man with 3 strands of long beard said in a deep voice, Even if I attack him, I can only defeat him. I can't kill him. The white-clothed youth was silent for a while. Then he said, Send a message to 3rd brother, and say, Gu Duxing can't be a match for anyone who isn't an emperor-level expert. The old man behind him shook. I lost 3 king-level experts. So 3rd brother must be very happy. But, I want to make him lose a few emperor-level experts this time. The white-clothed youth smiled warmly and said, Ao Qing Yin and I have joined forces for the time being. But that guy is hiding in the 2nd level. He wants to consume our strength. Humph humph. He waved his hand and said, Bury the corpses on the spot. Let's go. He then turned around and said, Our clan has come out this time to avenge Ao Xie Yin. But it's only a convenient reason. So it's better to take advantage of this chaos in the Jianghu and unify the Jianghu. Survival of the fittest will happen in this process. Gu Duxing can't be taken. Then what about the other paths? He softly muttered and said, Who's Ao Feng Yin in the heavens? This youth was Ao clan's young master, Ao Feng Yin. Everyone thought that he was dealing with the Tian clan, Li clan, and the other clans. But no one could have imagined that this ambitious youth would come here. Young master, this old man thinks that we should prioritize the clan's affairs. I'm afraid that someone will get the upper hand if we complicate things like this. That long-bearded old man slightly sighed and advised. No, the chaos in the three heavens can't be stopped. The war among the big clans has already begun. No one can stop it now. We won't make a move on those clans. But someone else will. And our top priority now is to nibble away at them from the periphery. We'll observe little by little. We'll strengthen ourselves while we watch others weaken. This is the way of the king, Ao Fengyin insipidly said. But Gu Duxing is so sharp. He lost 3 king-level experts just to test the waters. This is beyond my expectations. He turned around and left. But this is better. We'll wait until Gu Duxing returns to the clan. We'll put pressure on the Gu clan and make the entire Gu clan come over to seek refuge. A group of people followed him and disappeared into the forest. A long time passed. Then, a figure flashed out of the forest with a schwa sound. It was Gu Duxing who had left. It turned out that he had quietly sneaked back after he had left. So it's the people of the Ao clan. I was wondering why this attack was so strange. Gu Duxing's face was as cold as steel. He disdainfully muttered to himself. A mere Ao Fengyin wants to put pressure on the entire Gu clan? Alright, I'll wait for you to put pressure on them. Consider this a big gift for Ao Xieyin. I heard that there's someone waiting for me ahead? Gu Duxing frowned. Is the Ao clan crazy? They're making an example out of me at this time? He stood up and left through the forest. He walked forward for another 500 miles. Suddenly, someone in the forest said faintly, Is that Gu Duxing of the Gu clan? Gu Duxing frowned. He finally saw the person who was waiting for him. He stopped and shouted, Who is it? The forest was silent. 2 figures quietly appeared from both sides. They wore loose robes with big sleeves. Their gazes were cold. 2 emperor-level experts. Gu Duxing's pupil shrank. 2 emperor-level experts had indeed appeared. Gu Duxing, I've come here today to bestow upon you a great fortune. The person on the right was expressionless. He said indifferently, Join us, and I'll guarantee that your Gu clan will be safe and sound. The person on the left smiled mischievously. If you don't, the Gu clan will be wiped out in an instant. Gu Duxing's sword-like eyebrows suddenly rose. His murderous aura surged out violently. He didn't say a word, but his body emitted a biting cold sword aura. It was as if he had turned into a heaven-shaking divine sword at this moment. His whole body emitted a light that made people not dare to look up at him. His right hand pressed on the sword hilt at his waist. His 5 fingers slowly closed. The black dragon sword suddenly let out an excited sword cry. At the same time, the sword sheaths at the waists of the 2 people on the other side also let out a crisp sword cry. It was gentle and respectful. It was as if they had seen the emperor's officials. They were kneeling down and performing the 3 kowtow ceremony. The 2 people on the other side suddenly changed. They held onto their sword hilts and stared coldly at Gu Duxing. You're not willing? Gu Duxing snorted coldly. The black dragon sword left its sheath. In the next moment, he had already turned into a sword light. He had already killed 3 people without knowing. Now, 2 more wouldn't make a difference. He didn't say a word from beginning to end. To the dead, what difference did it make whether he spoke or not? The sword light was like a dragon. Chapter 605. You don't know how to appreciate favors. The 2 people on the opposite side hadn't expected that Gu Duxing would attack without saying a word. So they shouted angrily at the same time and pulled out their swords to meet him. Gu Duxing snorted. His body suddenly accelerated, and he finally opened his mouth. Then he coldly shouted, I am the emperor of 10,000 swords. His body suddenly turned into a wisp of flowing light. Those 2 emperor-level experts were originally full of confidence. They thought that they were both second-grade emperor-level experts. So, wouldn't it be easy for them to deal with a guy who had just broken through to the emperor level? A sense of contempt rose in their hearts when Gu Duxing moved. They thought, Is he a sword emperor? He is full of vigor, but his speed is too slow. However, they didn't expect that Gu Duxing would suddenly accelerate in the air as soon as this thought arose in their minds. Both of them were startled at the same time. So they quickly changed their way of fighting the enemy. They moved from left and right to the front. This was their best joint attack method. One in the front would block, and the other would kill. This method had always been successful in every endeavor. However, Gu Duxing coldly said 5 words like a monarch descending to the world. I am the Emperor of 10,000 swords. The two almost laughed out loud. You are the Emperor of 10,000 swords with this speed? Don't you think that the wind will cut your tongue? However, both of them were immediately horrified. That was because Gu Duxing's body had suddenly accelerated for the second time after he had shouted these 5 words. Moreover, this speed was several times faster than his previous speed. The two of them only had enough time to block with their swords. Then they heard a crack sound. Gu Duxing was like a hurricane mixed with a thunderstorm. He had already rushed past the two of them. He didn't even turn his head. He brought along a sharp whistling sound as he quickly disappeared into the forest behind the two of them. A rumbling sound echoed. 70 or 80 big trees fell down, where Gu Duxing had passed through several hundred feet behind them. Dust filled the sky and covered the direction. The two of them remained motionless. A long time passed. The one in the front tried to move his hand. It seemed that he didn't have any problem. So, why did I feel cold just now? Therefore, he turned his head to look at his brother, and conveniently asked, Are you okay? The Emperor-level expert behind him couldn't help but smile, and said, He is only fast. But before he could finish his sentence, his eyes suddenly widened. This was because he clearly saw that his elder brother, who was originally facing away from him, was about to turn around and talk to him. Moreover, he had already said, Are you all right? Then his brother twisted his neck to look back, but he clearly saw that when his brother twisted his neck to look back, only the top half of his neck moved, but the bottom half of his neck didn't move. He just twisted his neck like that. The two halves of the neck were like a millstone that had fallen together. Someone pushed the top, causing the head to turn. However, the millstone itself did not move. At the same time, as he turned, a faint red line appeared at the joint of the upper and lower neck. He stared at his elder brother in shock and raised his hand. You. That Emperor expert turned his head and looked at his brother. He frowned and asked in a puzzled manner, What happened to me? He had said the first 3 words when a pillar of blood suddenly pushed his head up in the air. Then, he said the last word with an astonished look on his face. Are you angry? The Emperor-level expert behind him screamed in alarm. Then he felt that his neck was sticky. He touched it with his hand, and couldn't help but scream in fear. He then lowered his head to look. But blood suddenly spurted out of his neck when he lowered his head. His head fiercely rushed forward, and his eyes saw a big tree coming towards him. Puff! His head heavily knocked against the tree. His train of thought came to an end at this point. These two are extremely unlucky. They wouldn't have been killed so quickly even if they weren't Gu Duxing's match with their real cultivation and martial strength. In fact, it would have been very likely that both sides would have been injured if they had fought for a while. Moreover, they wouldn't have had to die. But they misunderstood one after another. And these misunderstandings have cost their lives. It was Ao Qingyin and Ao Fengyun's decision to deal with Gu Duxing. The Ao brothers have come out this time. Each of them is full of ambition. How can they replace Ao Xieyun's position if they don't accomplish something? Therefore, the brothers didn't say it clearly, but they had set their sights on the Jianghu. This is a big pie in the sky. Moreover, it's a God-given opportunity. This is a chaotic situation. I will become the next clan lord of Ao clan, as long as I can obtain enough benefits and show enough means. And this is nothing more than strength, power. Therefore, I must rope in some forces for my own use, and I can't look for the O clan alliance. They are my enemies. So, I will be scolded to death by my ancestors even if I succeed. Moreover, the clans outside the core of this storm don't feel that it's urgent. So they aren't in a hurry. So, I would only look for them to wrangle. Therefore, I can only choose one clan from Xie clan, Gu clan, Luo clan and Dong clan. And Gu clan is the weakest among these clans. In other words, Gu clan is in the most dangerous situation in this Jianghu storm. Therefore, Gu clan must look for a backer. The so-called alliance won't be of any help if they are attacked. Therefore, I must first pull Gu clan over. Gu clan is the weakest clan. But it's not a weak force for me. In fact, it's equivalent to double my strength. Moreover, it's a good start if I succeed in my first attempt. Ao Qing Yin and Ao Feng Yin are fighting both openly and covertly, but they are on the same side in general. That's because these two are blood-related brothers. Therefore, these two brothers hit it off and decided to deal with Gu clan. They will succeed once. And the key to deal with Gu clan is Gu Du Xing. That's because Gu Du Xing is basically the master of Gu clan at present. Moreover, Gu Du Xing has a special identity. He is the second master of Heavenly Armament Pavilion. And there's a good chance that Gu Du Xing could pull the entire Heavenly Armament Pavilion under his command if he joins them. At that time, the prospects will be very good. Therefore, these two brothers didn't discuss much before they decided to attack from the front and the back. They would capture Gu Du Xing first. Then, they would talk slowly. However, they didn't expect that Ao Feng Yun would dispatch 3 king-level experts. And they were all killed by Gu Du Xing in one move. This made Ao Feng Yun embarrassed. Moreover, they followed the principle of enjoy your blessings and bear your misfortune together. Everyone will suffer misfortune together. Therefore, they spread the news. Strictly speaking, there's nothing wrong with this statement. Emperor-level expert is Gu Du Xing, because he is a sword emperor at present. So a low-level emperor-level expert is dispatched to deal with him. But emperor-level experts are different from each other. And this statement had seriously misled Ao Qing Yin and the 2 emperor-level experts who were now dead. Emperor-level experts can't deal with him. This means that emperor-level experts can deal with him. Ao Qing Yin felt relieved when he saw this. Emperor-level experts can deal with him. So, wouldn't I be able to capture him alive if I send 2 emperor-level experts? Therefore, the 2 emperor-level experts came out to rob him with full confidence after they were misled. They were misled for the second time when they saw Gu Du Xing, so young. Then Gu Du Xing moved and misled them for the 3rd time. Too slow. Therefore, the 2 of them looked down on him. So, they naturally weren't willing to go all out. But, who would have thought that Gu Du Xing would accelerate again at this time? And he would accelerate again. His speed had increased to the extent that they couldn't react in the blink of an eye. The Black Dragon Sword has become one of the best divine weapons in the world after it has been modified by Chu Yang. And their heads have been chopped off. The 2 emperor-level experts didn't even have the time to unleash their domains. And they died in a daze. It could be said that they had died an extremely wrong death. And they had died in an extremely aggrieved manner. Gu Du Xing had already disappeared without a trace. Ao Qing Yin had come out with the people who had been lying in ambush. He was still faintly angry in his heart. He wanted to ask, 2 emperor-level experts were here. So why did they let him go? Why didn't they stop him? Then he saw the scene of these 2 heads falling down. This pampered Ao Qing Yin was struck dumb like a wooden chicken. He only felt that his brain was in chaos. How can this be? 2 emperor-level experts were dealing with one person, and their heads were chopped off so neatly. In fact, I didn't even feel anything. How can I speak when my heads have been chopped off? How can I still move? What a fast sword. The corner of an old man's eyes twitched beside him. He had a feeling of fear and trepidation. And he felt a lingering fear in his heart at the same time. This old man was a 7th grade emperor-level expert. It could be said that he was one of the few experts in the upper 3 heavens. But he asked himself honestly, I would have been seriously injured if I hadn't been misled by the words emperor-level expert is a match for him. And I would have been caught off guard by this sword attack if I hadn't been killed. Moreover, the enemy could have calmly left. This sword attack could have severed the human body's meridians. And it could have left the meridians of the human body in their original state of healing. And it could have continued to provide the body with vitality. To what extent is this fast? And to what extent is this sword sharp? 3rd young master, we can't deal with this Gu Du Xing. This old man hung his head dejectedly. This old man suggests that we shouldn't make an enemy out of him. This man isn't even 20 years old. And he has reached such a realm. So if we make an enemy out of him, and if he can grow up. Ao Qing Yin didn't think this way. He pondered and said, who do you mean to say that he can become a monarch-level expert? Or a saint-level expert? Saint-level expert, it's hard to say. However, Becoming a monarch-level expert isn't difficult for him. That old man hesitated for a moment. Then he replied with uncertainty. So, wouldn't we have a subordinate who is at least a monarch-level expert if we can subdue him? Ao Qingyun's eyes lit up. A subordinate of a monarch-level expert? Subdue him? That old man was startled. Is the third young master still thinking about this? Can't he understand what I mean? It's very likely that Ao clan will be destroyed if we offend such a powerful enemy. I obviously know the pros and cons of this. But, a person can always think of a way. Even a supreme-level expert has a weakness. Let alone an insignificant sword emperor? Ao Qingyun waved his hand disapprovingly. A man will always have conditions that he can't resist. The old man forced a smile. He touched his nose, and no longer spoke. He thought, you must be able to afford such conditions first. Chapter 606. Go and look for old master. That bastard is purely trying to trick us. Ao Qingyun's complexion changed. He finally remembered this matter and said, that bastard said something about emperor-level experts being a match for him. But he made me lose 2 great experts. This is preposterous. The old man forced a smile and thought, you are his competitor. Who else would he trick if not you? Ao Fengyin had already come to look for him, before he could go and look for him. Net. Third brother, how was it? That little guy was very difficult to deal with, right? Ao Fengyun's white clothes fluttered in the wind, as he spoke in a handsome manner. Then he found the 2 corpses. His eyelids twitched. This what's going on? Didn't I warn you? How come? How come such unnecessary casualties have occurred? The blue veins on Ao Qingyun's forehead throbbed. Old master, you are too despicable. What kind of warning was that? That was purely a trap, okay? Ao Fengyun's complexion changed. Third brother. What you're saying is meaningless. I warned you with good intentions. But you didn't do it? Ao Qingyun snorted. He was about to speak. But he was stopped by the old man behind him. The 2 brothers looked at each other. Then, they fiercely snorted from their nostrils. What do you plan to do with the Gu clan? Ao Fengyun knew when to stop. So he asked in a modest manner. I naturally have my own plans. Ao Qingyun replied angrily. Third brother. Do you mean that you want to break up with me? Ao Fengyun narrowed his eyes. Third brother. Both sides benefit if we cooperate. And both sides lose if we don't cooperate. You know this. We brothers are born from the same mother. So why should we harm our friendship over such a trivial matter? Ao Qingyun snorted. He thought in his heart. We are the weakest among all the people who have come out this time. So it would be inappropriate if we were to separate. He had no choice but to pinch his nose and agree. The Gu clan still has a weakness. And that is its insufficient heritage. It's impossible to rely on Gu Duxing, a sword emperor. Ao Qingyun let out a muffled sigh. I think that our plan of suppressing Gu Duxing is no longer feasible. We should start with the Gu clan. Then, we should threaten Gu Duxing instead. Third brother's wisdom is higher than the heavens. Ao Fengyun praised him. Since this is the case, we shouldn't delay any longer. We should hurry to the Gu clan. Go. The 2 groups of people mixed together and set off at the same time. However, the words of these 2 men had made the several emperor-level experts who had followed them secretly feel a chill in their hearts. Why should we hurt our friendship over such a small matter? Could it be that the lives of 2 emperor-level experts and 3 king-level experts are only a small matter in your eyes? Gu Duxing left like a whirlwind. However, he was secretly on high alert in his heart. It seems that the current situation is somewhat out of control. Ao clan was created in order to make use of their military strength to deal with Tian clan, Li clan, and Tu clan. But now, it has clearly deviated from the established direction. After Ao clan came out, they didn't immediately launch a strike against the other clans. Instead, they started to contend for hegemony in the Jianghu. The brothers seemed to be plotting against each other. It was really unexpected that such a situation would occur. I wonder what Chu Yang will do if he knows about this. However, the most important thing right now is that these 2 men from the Ao clan had clearly set their sights on the Gu clan first. They had to get past this hurdle first. But how was he going to pass this trial? As Gu Duxing sped along, he racked his brains. The Gu clan was too weak. They couldn't afford to offend the Ao clan in a head-on confrontation. Moreover, this was contrary to Chu Yang's established policy. I would only be hurting those close to me and making my enemies happy if I were to fight with these two young bastards. I would be doing a great favor to Tu Qian Hao and the others for no reason. And Chu Yang and the other brothers wouldn't look on with folded arms. They would certainly stand on my side. That would be a complete mess. I can't involve Chu Yang and the others. I can only solve this problem on my own. Gu Duxing thought along the way. He had a headache from thinking, but he couldn't come up with any solution. At this moment, he finally realized his own shortcomings. Perhaps he was an invincible general who could conquer cities and strongholds. But when it came to controlling the overall situation, he was still far from being able to do so. I want to protect myself in such a complicated situation. I don't want to implicate my brothers and allies. And I also want to resist the pressure of the Ao clan. It's very difficult. Gu Duxing sighed. He thought, I'm afraid that Chu Yang would have had endless tricks up his sleeves if it were him. But I'm helpless when it's my turn. Then he suddenly thought of something. What would Chu Yang do if he were in my position? With these thoughts in mind, Zhang Xian flew forward. Chu Yang went on the road alone. He went all the way east. Along the way, he unleashed his powerful spiritual power. While he hurried, he investigated. At the same time, he released the Calamity Sword to sense the elixirs. 1,000 miles went by smoothly. There was no wind or waves. Chu Yang felt strange. Logically speaking, someone should have tried to kill me. But I've already walked so far. I've passed 3 or 4 dangerous places along the way. So why hasn't anything happened? There's still a long way to go. But I'm on a scenic tour. So I'm not walking fast. Are they afraid of getting old? While he was thinking, the sword spirit suddenly exclaimed, There's a situation ahead. A situation? Minister Chu was startled. With a swoosh, his black clothes disappeared into the grass. His movements were extremely agile. Cough cough. There's a situation 20 miles away. The sword spirit was somewhat speechless. This guy didn't wait for me to finish speaking. And he disappeared without a trace. What? Why didn't you say so earlier? Chu Yang angrily got up and said, I was just being cautious. You're just a bird startled by the twang of a bough. The sword spirit sneered mercilessly. Chu Yang rolled his eyes. I'm all alone now. How can I not be careful? If I die, won't you die with me? I'm thinking for you. Don't be ungrateful. The sword spirit was speechless. I was obviously being overly careful. But I'm thinking for someone else. I've seen thick-skinned people. But I've never seen such a thick-skinned person. Who's that in front? Do you have any impression? Chu Yang asked in his mind as he cautiously climbed up and down. A little closer. I can't detect it now, the sword spirit said. Chu Yang lowered his head and ran. He used his concealment technique to the extreme. Even if he stared, he could only see the grass swaying. The trees in the forest swayed. If he could switch to slow motion, he could see that he was sometimes running, sometimes crouching, sometimes turning sideways, sometimes walking backward, and sometimes somersaulting. What was worth mentioning was that when he made these movements, he actually made use of the reflection of the grass on the ground and the refraction of the sunlight in the sky to hide his figure. Therefore, in broad daylight, he actually turned into a specter. The road was getting shorter little by little. 15 kilometers, 5 kilometers. Finally, the sword spirit issued a warning when they were close to 3 kilometers away. Well, the opposite party has experts. Be careful not to be detected. Chu Yang was startled. He then lightened his footsteps. Thousands of feet? How can I be detected? Could it be that the opposite party has a super emperor level expert? Well, these people in front of us are the most tyrannical in terms of strength. Except for O Kofeng of the O clan. The sword spirit's voice was very cautious. Chu Yang sucked in a cold breath. So powerful? Moreover, they have clearly obtained accurate information. And they have a clear target. They have come to deal with you. The sword spirit carefully sensed and said. But their auras are very familiar. Several of them have an aura similar to Ao Xieyun's. Chu Yang was gobsmacked. His breathing became chaotic. Are you sure? I'm sure. The sword spirit was very sure. Chu Yang's mind was somewhat in a knot. He said in frustration, "The people of the Ao clan? What reason do the people of the Ao clan have to deal with me? They should be dealing with the Tiong clan, Tu clan, and the Black Devil clan. Why are they dealing with me instead? How much did this duke help them? How can they be so ungrateful?" The sword spirit was also puzzled after pondering for a long time. After all, Ao clan didn't have any reason to attack Chu Yang first. Could it be that they are looking for you to inquire about Ao Xiaoyan? The sword spirit probed. Absolutely not. They would have come to me openly if that were the case. They wouldn't have sneakily set up an ambush like this. A cold light flashed in Chu Yang's eyes. He then extended his hand and wiped his face. Then he spread his arms, and a burst of crackling sounds came from inside his body. His slender stature had become 3 inches shorter. It had become somewhat stout. He had a leopard head and round eyes. His face was fierce and fierce. He groped around in the tribulation space for a while. Then he pulled out a broadsword. Then he thought for a while. Then he took out a veil and covered his face. "You've already changed your appearance. Why do you still want to cover your face?" The sword spirit was puzzled. This is the ingenuity of this plan. Chu Yang snorted. Then he wrinkled his brows. He felt that something was wrong, and said, "You've also seen the appearance of the young Black Devil. Can you imitate him even a little bit?" The sword spirit wrinkled his brows and said, "I can use my spiritual power to help you, but it can only last for half an hour." "Half an hour? That's enough." Chu Yang was overjoyed. He immediately restored his changed appearance to its original state. Then a grayish mist came out of his body. He was now wearing a black robe and a black mask. He looked exactly like a young Black Devil. He was just standing there, but his whole body was emitting a gloomy aura. "The most important thing is your eyes," the sword spirit reminded. "No problem." Chu Yang's vision condensed. Then, his eyes suddenly changed into the cruel and ruthless eyes of a scavenger vulture in the desert. At first glance, he looked exactly like a young Black Devil. Whether it was his figure, charm, or the temperament of his eyes, or the characteristics of his cultivation techniques, everything was perfect. This impostor laughed strangely in a hoarse voice and said, "The trifling Ao clan dares to oppose my Black Devil? They don't know the meaning of death. Watch me kill them one by one." He rushed out with a schwa sound. "Don't be rash. It's better to check first. What if they don't have any evil intentions?" The sword spirit hastily reminded him. "There's no need to check. You must pay the price if you dare to provoke my Black Devil." Minister Chu had clearly gotten into the act. He was emitting a murderous aura. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.